That's all right. I'm spread out.
Oh, good.
I wasn't aware of that. Okay, that I've been, so I've been over this for a while now, and now I'm to the point where I'm gathering.
This isn't even ANC.
Hello.
Test.
What happened? Did he just snap?
Oh, okay.
This is a
This
coworker.
is Brandon Rooney.
Why did you tell?
We're all different shadings of different ANC members.
Okay.
Can you make it not be on the
Mostly like 125 for ANC.
What's that?
Can you make it
No,
not
that'd
be
be
on
great, because that's what,
ever?
you know,
It's on me and
as-
Dave.
what is that dot on the sidewalk?
So
Enough
there's
for you?
an argument
That's
over.
fine for me.
Okay.
That I appreciate.
So,
Thank
hi.
you. Then I'll be
Hi,
nice to
Noah.
you.
That's Manila.
So, if you know this area here, between the CBS and
I-
the
I
BP
think
station,
Yeah.
there's this ugly.
I'll tell you. I'll send the picture.
All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 2013 ANC 3F meeting in the Methodist Home. I am Adam Tope, Chairman of ANC 3F, and if everyone wants to introduce yourselves going down the list, so your microphones, hopefully the sound on the live stream is working. Email me if it's not, but we have microphones on everyone now, so it should work. So anyone in the audience will not hear, but it's to the internet. Anyway, sorry.
Mary Beth Ray, 3F03.
I'm Bob Summersgill, 3F07 and Treasurer.
I'm David Slorzno Lowell, 3F06 and Secretary.
Karen Perry, ANC 3F02 Vice Chair.
Sally Gresham, ANC 3F04.
Manoli Priotakis, 3F05.
All right, so the first order is, are there any additions or, well, we have a quorum, every commissioner's here. On the agenda, are there any additions or deletions or changes to the agenda? Karen?
I have a minor amendment to the minutes from May, so can we move that down to the end?
All right, we'll do it then. Anything else? Okay, can I have I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Can I have a second? Second by Bob. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, approved unanimously. So the first item is our police report. Is there there is. There is. Welcome. We now have a microphone as well. If you don't mind speaking into it.
You're welcome to, well, but we want it to be picked up by the,
It goes on the
for the
internet.
live stream.
Okay,
I
how
can
about
change the height though.
How about that?
That's
Okay,
perfect.
works.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lieutenant Roman. I'm with PSA 203. And this is Officer Kennedy. He's one of the officers, one of our officers that patrols the area of PSA 203. This evening, what I'm basically going to do, I'm going to give you a comparison of the crimes that occurred last year in our PSA in comparison to this year, at this time, you know, from June, at this time in June. So the first crime that impacts our community is the homicides. In 2012, we had 1 homicide, and as of 2013, we have 1 homicide. Then sex abuse, 2012, around in June of 2012, we had 3. June of 2013, we have 3. But as I looked at this report, it appears that in the months of August and September of last year, it appears that it spiked. So August and September of last year. Now I'm looking at the robberies. Last year in 2012, in June, we had 25. This year we have 9. So our robberies are down. In the months of July and August of last year, of course, we seen a decrease in those 2 months. They continue to decline. Then the assault with the dangerous weapons. In June of 2012, last year, we had 11. This year, we have 6. And it appears that in the months that follow, they continue to go down. Now, as far as the burglaries, We're up in our burglaries. Last year, this time, we had 18. This year, we have 20 in the month of June. It appears that in July and August, the burglaries, they started to go up. So, July and August, I don't know why they went up in July and August, but July and August, that's next month, and the month afterwards, you know, just be alert that the burglaries went up this time last year. Motor vehicle thefts. We're down with our motor vehicle thefts. Last year we had 10 in the month of June. This year we have 5. And it appeared that in the months of July, it went up, and then it went back down again in the months of August. So, and I don't have the stats for July of this year. And let's see. Now, theft from autos. Last year, this time, we had 155 theft from autos in 2012, June 2012. This year, we have 36. So it has gone down really, really good. Okay, and that concludes my report. Any questions?
Any commissioners have questions? Karen?
I think I'm not as concerned about statistics as I am about what's actually happening in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And I know the Northwest Current in their edition has been put in some robberies that occurred recently in our neighborhood. One with a knife at the corner of Vesey and Connecticut.
Okay.
Can you tell us something about that?
Do you know the business manager? Well, at this moment, I can't tell you what happened, and I'm gonna be honest, I can't tell you, but I can get that information. You give me the email, and I can forward it to somebody, and then you can get it out to everyone else.
Okay, because I think
Okay,
most of
that
us
was
are
easy.
concerned more about what's actually happening than statistics. And I know the Northwest Current, the Washington Post have those crime sections.
Okay. What
So
I-
I'd like to know what's
Well,
those
I read-
events, those things actually are.
Our statistics is based on, actually it's based on what is actually happening. She's comparing what happened last year to what's happening
I
now this
understand
year.
that, but I think most people don't care about the numbers. They care about why was the knife used, what happened there.
So you,
Do you
in
have
other words,
some-
when we come, you want us to, you know, any incident that occurred, you want some additional information
I,
on it?
I think so. I think people really want to know what the incidents
And I
are.
don't see, there's no problem with that. We'll make sure we get that. for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
We just asked that during the summer months that the crimes do kind of go up in
Yeah.
July and August, so we ask that you be more vigilant as far as theft from autos. Try not to leave stuff in plain view of your car, because that's going to tip somebody to go into your cars and stuff like that. Lock your doors. Don't assume that it's a nice neighborhood, because that's where the criminals are going to come. And if you make it easy for them, they're going to keep coming back.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
A lot of us were really concerned about the sexual assault on Chesapeake Street, and as it turned out, the perpetrator knew the
Was known
victim.
to the victim.
So I think there was, I hate to say a sense of relief, but I think some people were less anxious about what had happened, you know, once they realized there was a connection. But is there any update on that you can provide us?
Basically what you have said, I believe, the last thing that, the captain mentioned to me, I think the gentleman that, did the assault, I believe he's been arrested.
He
He
Well,
committed
he killed
suicide.
He killed
Suicide this
himself
morning
this
in jail.
morning.
He committed suicide this morning?
Yes.
Yeah.
The captain must not be informed of that either.
It's all over the news.
It's all over the news.
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't get to watch the news this morning. But, you know, the last day, I mentioned that to the captain before I came, and the last that he had was that the gentleman had been incarcerated, and that during his incarceration, he had been assaulted. Now, that's why you said something, because see, what's on the news, we have to get all the facts, because sometimes what's on the news, we have to verify it. You know, what's on the news.
Okay,
So
well,
you're
I
saying
think
that he-
to,
So, now, let me ask you something. Now, what are you asking me? If the news said that he committed suicide, what other additional information that you need?
I guess I just wanted to know if there was any update on,
I have not received any updates about
Okay.
that. And
Okay.
evidently, the captain has not either. relative to that particular case. But if you would like for me to, I believe if you don't know, you should find out. If you want me to, I will find that out. If there's additional information, I'll be happy to get that back to you.
That would be great. That would
Okay.
be great. What is your email address?
Okay, Patricia, Patricia, dot Roman, ROMAN, @dc.gov.
Sally?
I've noticed there's more of a presence late at night of policemen on bicycles, especially in the Chevy Chase area, somewhat in our area, 3F, more in the Cleveland Park corridor, not in the Forest Hills. Are you all putting more policemen on bicycles in our area?
Yes, ma'am, we are. We're putting, actually, not only are we putting, we're doing some undercover operations as well.
Because there've been quite a few burglaries in
We're doing
Chevy
some
Chase.
undercover too, as well. That's why they put the numbers up, we don't keep it down. But I know what you're saying, you want more, you wanna know, I'll get it.
I wanna know what happened, yeah.
That's right.
And
I know,
I
I
wanna
would
know
too.
I wanna know the actual incidents that occur, not
Yes.
just a number.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else
Is
have
there
anything?
anyone in the audience have a question at all?
Just a quick question. In terms of the July and August crime rise, is that part
No,
of?
not everything now, which one?
Oh,
It was
I
only
can't
certain
remember,
ones.
yeah.
Okay.
If you could repeat what those are, and are they connected at all to people's absences for summer vacation and active?
Okay, some of the ones that was.
To actually know if they're connected with somebody leaving for vacation or something, we have to look at the actual report. But I wouldn't say that most of them probably wouldn't be connected, because you have to just, as far as burglaries, you can't always know why the burglar picked a certain house, or maybe he saw papers on the porch, maybe he was walking around checking doors. And sometimes people are actually home when they come in the house, but they leave the doors open. That's why I say during the summer months, a lot of people are out. They know people go on vacation, or even if you're not on vacation, you're just out of the house. You may have kids, let me take them to the pool for the day, or whatever. Burglars, they come around through the neighborhood and they actually check the doors. And the feedback that I've been getting from people in the community, oh, I didn't know this would happen because I live in a nice neighborhood. But the criminals not going to the bad neighborhood, they coming to the nice neighborhood, just where they can get. And as long as you make it easy for them, they're coming back. So I hope you would lock your doors, take everything out of your cars, leave nothing in plain view, and lock your car. Anything that you see suspicious, do not hesitate to call us. 24/7, that's how we work. We'll come out, we'll send somebody out. But if you, like I say, if you see it, if you think it's suspicious, no matter how minute, because it may be that one little piece of information that tips us off, call us. Okay?
I just wanted, a trick that seems to go around is people around holiday times will put flyers in the door. So
Yes.
they can tell if somebody's
That's
opened
right.
the door or not.
Mhm.
So in our cul-de-sac, we go around and
That's a
the
good.
neighbors help neighbors and pull things from the doors, that kind of thing. So just
That's
asking.
good, that's really good.
It's an interesting.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming to our meeting again, and hopefully we'll see you next month again.
Thank you.
They might
Thank
not
you.
come back.
They might not. Scared them away.
Bring stats next time, more stats.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, okay, see you.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is the commissioner announcements. So we'll start with Mary Beth and work our way down. If you have an announcement, please give it. Speak into your microphone just so it gets recorded, right? Thanks.
I have 7 announcements. The first announcement relates to the Vibrant Streets Initiative, which is a program sponsored by the DC Office of Planning, and the Van Ness application was successful. We won. So we will be part of the Retail Streets Inventory and Review. The workshop takes place on June 26th. We have 3 team members from the Van Ness area. Marlene Berlin, who's the editor of the Forest Hills Connection, a representative from BF Fall, and myself. So we'll keep you posted on that. In the meantime, the Vibrant Streets project, which is run by a contractor called Street Sense, not the Street Sense that does the homeless newspapers, but a private urban planning consulting company, has done an inventory of the retail operations in the Van Ness neighborhood. And so I have a copy of that. If anybody would like to look at it and help me make sure that it's correct, that would be great. They're also encouraging us to take photographs of things that we like, things that we don't like, things that work, things that don't work in our neighborhood. There's a Dropbox where you can load up your photographs. So if anybody is interested in taking photographs, David Bardeen has been absolutely leading the charge on that, and we're grateful for his help. But if anybody else would like to help, please see me and I can give you the Dropbox information. The second item is that Marlene Berlin and I met with Patricia Elwood, who is Mayor Gray's Director of Protocol and International Liaison, to talk about ways that we can engage with the embassies. We have a lot of ideas on how to do that, and they seem to be very excited about it. One easy thing is that we're going to work with Giant Grocery Store in Karen's area, and we're going to start doing, they are going to start doing international displays. So, for example, the featured country might be Italy, and there would be a display of pasta, which they would put on sale and decorated with Italian flags and so forth. Anyway, so just another way to think of ways that we can connect with the embassies in our neighborhood. The third item is the Van Ness Vision Committee. Adam suggested that we meet in the evening. Some people are not able to join us on Friday mornings, so we're going to try an evening meeting. So the next meeting of the Van Ness Vision Committee will be on Wednesday, July 10th. If there are 12 people or fewer, it'll be at my house, and if there are more than 12, we'll meet at the Methodist home. So please RSVP so we know where the meeting will be.
What time?
7:30. The fourth item is I'd like to acknowledge Michael Trafficant with Mayor Gray, who was instrumental in helping us get the Department of Public Works out to clean up the trailheads at Albemarle and also at Wyndham Street. And we're really grateful. These are, again, we're thinking of what makes our neighborhood unique, the embassy presence, and the connection to Rock Creek Park. And the two links to, well, two of the key links to Rock Creek Park are through Soapstone, one on Albemarle at 32nd Street, and the other on Wyndham Place behind the new WAMU building. And they've been just ratty, full of litter, full of weeds, poison ivy, just a total mess. And we're grateful to Michael and the Department of Public Works for heading out this morning and cleaning up. I think they've got a little bit more work to do tomorrow, but it's a lot better. And we still have other issues. There's concrete dumped in the park, and there's just a number of other erosion and some other issues that we're going to continue working on, but it's getting better. The fifth issue is I understand from the Commission on Fine Arts that one of our neighbors is planning to build a new home on Broad Branch, and I was supposed to meet with the architect today and was not able to do it, so I'll plan to meet with him on Friday, I think. But anyway, stay tuned for more information on that. They will need a curb cut, as I understand it, which I think will come to us. I'm not completely clear on all the procedure. I know Karen's an expert on that. But I do want to give everybody a heads up that there is a new home being planned on Broad Branch Road. You know, sorry, I don't have the address, but I can find out. Sorry? It's between let's see, what is it between? Between Brandywine and Davenport? Is that right? Karen, do you know the address? No, is it the other side of Davenport? I've driven by it, but
You're talking about Sarah, who called me from the Commission of
Yeah,
Fine Arts?
yeah.
It was Broad Branch and,
It's 46,
no,
64.
it's not the three
no.
homes. It's not
No,
those
not
three
those
homes.
ones?
This is totally different.
yeah, I've got it written down, and anybody who wants it, come up to me afterward, and I'll find it in my notes. Let's see, the sixth announcement is that the Polish ambassador's residence, I don't know if anybody's walked by lately, but it was getting really ratty, and it looked like they had moved out. And sure enough, they have. They've moved out, and they're planning on selling it. And so we're now in contact with a representative from the Polish embassy, and they've assured us that they're going to do a better job at keeping the grass mowed and cleaning the pond. The pond is a real mosquito magnet. So hopefully they'll do a better job with that. They're planning on putting it on the market in September. So hopefully somebody's not going to chop it up and, you know, build lots of houses. But anyway, we'll stay on top of that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is the River Smart program. And we're going to have a representative from River Smart come talk to us either July or one of our next few meetings. This is a really terrific program that I'm happy to speak with anybody about, where they are trying to enable private property owners to make changes on their property that will improve the stormwater runoff and ultimately lead to a cleaner Rock Creek. So if you have concrete that you want pulled out and pervious surface to replace it, if you want rain barrels, if you want to plant trees, there are just lots of things that they will help you accomplish. So if anybody wants more information, see me, and stay tuned for more at a future ANC meeting. That's it.
Okay, I just have one. I met with a committee from the condo at 3901 Connecticut on May 25th. The committee is tasked with putting together recommendations for the Kuwaiti ambassador on the things that the neighbors would like for the new consulate on Tilden. All of their requests deal with areas around the consulate and not the aesthetic style or building materials. And I sent the request to Wayne Quinn, who's the lawyer representing the Kuwaitis and who came to our meeting a few months back. And hopefully, we're hoping that the ambassador and staff will find the requests to be reasonable and incorporate them into their plans.
No announcements, right?
I have two quick announcements. So, as approved last month, we filed a complaint with the Zoning Commission for UDC's noncompliance of their zoning order and campus plan. Based on our review, we found that 12 out of 28 conditions were not being met, which is 42% of them. Pretty high. Also, I'd like to thank Marjorie Scher. She is attending a DC Water meeting at American University. They're fixing a bunch of stuff in the park right behind us, and she's attending on our behalf to take notes and collect things, so I appreciate that a lot.
I have none.
I have three. I'm going to update you on American University, WAMU. Their move-in schedule is proceeding. They are moving in the WAMU offices and the University Communications and Marketing departments on roughly June 15th. On July 15th, they're doing the Office of Development. The WAMU studios that you're seeing on the first floor with the glass, that won't be to the end of the summer. Right now, they have a snafu with the public space construction. There seems to be a discrepancy or issue between DDOT and AU on the work of the sidewalk grading that has already been put in by the city. They hope to resolve that in the next week, 2 weeks, and still have the public space work done hopefully by September 1st. I'll keep you more updated on that as the next meeting. The minor interior work, the ticker tape and the signage will be done after everybody's moved in. I have been, as well as Mary Beth, we have been working with the National Park Service, DDOT, AU, Rock Creek Conservancy, the community on trying to clean up the mini park during construction. AU has, after a lot of prodding, has done a very good job. They have cleaned it up. They put 2 trash cans in place, and they say that they're going to do improvements after they move in. We're going to work with them on the erosion problem. There is a severe erosion problem on the back of the building that goes down into Soapstone Valley, and hopefully that is something we'll be able to resolve in the next year or so. The next item is the Forest Hill Playground renovation. They had a charrette on May 5th. It was very good. The design team of Siteworks and SM Studios has finished a conceptual design, but it is now with the Department of Parks and Recreation. They are doing the review. The review they hope to have done by the end of this month, and then they will have a community meeting for everyone to attend, hopefully by the end of the summer is what they're projecting. At one point they were going to present this presentation at the ANC, but they've decided they would prefer to do it as a community. They will come and do a short presentation to the ANC if we think that's necessary. And then the third will be the Van Ness Square, but we'll address that later on the agenda.
Just a handful real quickly. I do want to echo the Mary Beth's comments about River Smart, but also as a having participated in the program, it is a very good program, the River Smart Homes, but also if you live in an apartment building, it's also available to high-rise apartments, and there's a one of the buildings in my district is actually going through the process right now, and we're working with buildings up the block as well to see if there's possibilities of taking advantage of aggregation of effort. Just on school boundaries, there's been discussion some in the past, and we were expecting the proposal, as has been in the news. It looks like there'll be at least a year delay on consideration based on legislation introduced by Councilmember Catania, and then a year delay of any implementation. So it looks like any change on boundaries is probably 2 years away at the earliest. Councilmember Catania also appeared last week at the Merch HSA. He's as part of his new chairmanship of the Education Committee, making the rounds to all schools, apparently all public schools in the city, and Merch was the latest in that series. And he spoke about the legislation he's introduced that they're going through a series of hearings on right now. Also on the, moving back to the energy and environmental side, been working with residents on my block on Nebraska Avenue to put together a session potentially here with DC Solar United Neighborhoods, DC Sun, that's a coalition to sort of aggregate effort on looking at opportunities for introducing solar panels to homes. If anybody's interested, you can send me an email at manolis@manolisANC.com, manolis@manolis.com. And the last thing is that there will be some construction on Connecticut between Cumberland and Davenport that's going to take a couple weeks. That's going to create some annoyances, but I want to thank DDOT for taking on repairing some much-needed ADA, make some of the curbs ADA compliant, and taking care of some problems with runoff that has been a hazard for some bus stops. So they were responsive, and we're pleased that they were willing to take on that work to make those repairs.
Thanks. So the next item on the agenda is our open forum. If you have an announcement, if you want to come on up to our microphone, so if people can hear you speak, that'd be great. Any issue or whatnot announcement you wish to make to our ANC and neighbors?
My name is Michael Fabricant, Ward 3 Liaison, Mayor Gray. Just two quick announcements. Also, Commissioner Perry wanted to recommend the MPD 2D listserv if you're not already on it.
I am,
Oh, so you can get like up to the minute
I do. But I think
stories.
the community needs to know also.
Sure, and anybody, the MPD 2D listserv, they're pretty good at getting back on specific incidents. So, but that's just one great resource for the community. Two quick announcements. One, the mayor will be right here on Thursday evening at 7:30. The Ward 3 Democrats are hosting an evening with the mayor. He'll make some brief remarks and then a lot of time for question and answers. And also, everyone is invited July 4th to the Palisades Parade to march with the mayor. If you have any questions, you can email me. It's Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, dot my last name, F as in Frank, A-B-R-I-K-A-N-T at dc.gov. And my phone number is 202-297-6566. Thank you.
What time is the meeting this Thursday?
Thursday, right here, 7:30. 7:30 to 9 or so. Thank you.
Or longer?
Hi, I'm Nina Dodge, and I'm here thanks to champion David Bardeen, who has talked to many of you about the Green Living DC Expo that's been held annually for 4 years at UDC, and we're holding it again this fall. We've got a date, and save the dates have just gone out for Saturday, September 7th, and this will be held at UDC. It's a partnership between a number of groups, Office of Planning, who really kicked this whole tradition off. We have a citizens group that encompasses this neighborhood and nearby ones called Green Living DC, and you can check our website out at greenlivingdc.org. The Forest Hills Connection folks are also part of our sponsors. And this year, UDC Causes College, which many of you might be familiar with through Dean Sabine O'Hara, which is the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability, and Environmental Sciences. They are a strong co-sponsor. Stay posted. I'll be reporting a little bit, stay tuned rather, I'll be reporting a bit on substance at the next meeting. But essentially this last fall we had 50 exhibitors and vendors, an entire day of really dynamo presentations, demonstrations, kid-friendly events, fun for the whole family. Farmers market was out there. The emphasis is on energy and water conservation and efficiency, clean energy also, and we also have a strong focus on sustainable urban agriculture and nutritious food. So we're going to be partnering more with the farmers market this time. And as I say, stay tuned. I've got some propaganda here, some of you have. Whoops. If you know of, this is a mixture of nonprofit organizations serving DC residents, as well as for-profit businesses, as well as institutions, including the DC Department of the Environment, DDOT, Water, DC WASA, and we profile very strongly the services that are available through our tax dollars, including the free water audits that are part of the River Smart Homes project, and free energy audits, etc. Thank you very much. And I'm at ndodge53@gmail.com if you have any immediate questions. Otherwise, as I say, stay tuned.
I just want to thank Nina for coming tonight. This is a great event. Had a fantastic time and learned a lot last year. And thanks for coming tonight. And thanks for your help for me personally and some of the work in my district that is ongoing. So.
Thank you. And just to add, we are looking for volunteers. We'll have about 10 to 15 student volunteers provided by UDC helping with this event. But following on David's wonderful lead, if anybody's interested in helping out conceptually, with communications, heavy lifting, whatever, we'd welcome your help and also participation. And also in terms of coordinating with programs that you've been telling us about this evening, I think there's some rich areas for collaboration where you might even profile some of the projects you're doing. Both the ones that you're making a lot of headway on, but there might be some creative ways of putting challenges forward, like the Polish Embassy mosquito pond. That there's a really nice educational opportunity there that actually causes might take up, but think creatively about how you might participate. We'd love to collaborate with you.
Well, I have an important collaboration suggestion. I'd like to test drive the Tesla. Can you arrange that?
Everybody.
Thanks. Does anyone else have an announcement?
A forum contribution, Michael Newman, 3883 Connecticut Avenue. Our building is adjacent to the proposed Kuwaiti embassy expansion. Our condo association came up with a list of concerns a few weeks ago. We submitted them to the attorney for the Kuwaiti embassy, the same fella who was here to speak to the ANC in January, and we got a response saying they can't talk to us now because they're still assembling a quote-unquote development consultant team, and they're still working on a quote-unquote beginning design, so they're not ready to talk yet. This seemed either unclear or not totally consistent with the fairly glossy, elaborate concept design PowerPoints that were presented to this ANC by the Kuwaiti embassy team, including that attorney and their architect last January. Around the same time that we had that communication, our building manager got in touch with Bob Summersgill and asked what's going on, and Bob made an inquiry to Kuwait as well, and I think I wish I could find that quote here. I think I've got it.
Uh-oh.
You sent it right back to us here. This is very informative. Quote, this is the embassy talking. The embassy has not yet employed a development manager. As soon as we have any beginning plans, we will be in touch. So this may or may not be inconsistent with what they told us last January, but my only contribution that I can think of at this point is thank you for trying to find out what you can, and we would appreciate it if the embassy would, if the ANC would keep an eye on this situation, because it's either going in a different direction than it was before, or it's just a communication issue.
I keep asking, and they keep saying they're not ready to meet with anyone, but as soon as I know something, I'll let you know.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
3883 Connecticut.
Thanks. Is there anyone else in the audience? Okay. So next item on the agenda is a presentation by John Thomas of the Urban Forestry Administration about tree laws and trees and all the things that we love in Van Ness and Forest Hills.
I just want to go through our services and how to ask for our services and when to expect them, and then open it up for questions, probably because there's more specifics. But I put brochures out on the table. Please grab one because it's everything we do, and it's easy to read, I hope, and follow.
Excuse me.
Gives you links to the website, gives you our
Mr.
phone
Thomas?
number, gives you the 311 number, gives you the 311 website that you can enter service requests in. Keep it close by.
Excuse me, Bob.
Yep.
Yeah, can you
I can be closer to
use
this.
the microphone as much as you can,
Sure.
so
Can I
they
take
can
it
hear
out
it
of
at home?
Out of this?
Yeah.
That'd be
Sorry.
all right. Okay. Might be easier. All right. So basically, urban forestry, we're in the Department of Transportation, and we manage all of the street trees in the city, approximately 140,000 street trees. We also manage all the LID and stormwater bioretention cells that are installed through our construction branch within the Department of Transportation. We also work with zoning, tree and slope overlay, which is part of this area. Also with a special tree bill where you're required to have a permit for trees on private property over 55 inches or greater that are healthy or hazardous, but any tree greater than 55 needs a permit. That comes through our office. We also work with DDOE on MS4 permit. The mayor has several goals out there that we're in charge of. 40% canopy goal by 2032. We also have to make sure that we're in compliance with the MS4 permit, which feeds back to stormwater controls and what's happening to our rivers, both the Anacostia and the Potomac. And we're also a myriad of little things that are within the Sustainable DC program. There's tree planting concepts, agriculture, other things in there that we're tied into and helping promote. And then we also work with DGS and DPR to assist them with tree issues on schools, parks, and basically all the properties within the Department of General Services portfolio. We have about 13, well, we have 18 certified arborists. We have about 13 that are in the field covering the city on a daily basis. The rest are either doing plan review or development review. Any plan review that comes through for private or public development on a streetscape come through our office, so we make sure that the tree design is tree friendly, stormwater friendly. It gives us more soil volume for our trees. Curb cuts, we're adamantly against curb cuts. We vote them down all the time because we lose trees. When we get curb cuts, we lose tree boxes and tree spaces. So we really try to clean up the curb cut situation that we have in a lot of the commercial corridors. We have multiple entrances. And basically, the rest of the time we're doing all our services, we receive about 18,000 service requests a year for that 13 staff. We generate about 15 to 16,000 work orders to manage the trees and keep us on a 5-year pruning cycle. Last year we planted about 7,000 street trees throughout the city. We have also managed all the storms, so the most recent storms and weather we had, the slight scare we had last week of another Derecho didn't happen, but anything that happens, hurricanes, large storms, or trees fail, we're the group that manages that cleanup with help from DPW and other members within our group at DDOT. Then we also work with HEPCO, so we manage and work with their program of what they're doing with their infrastructure through the city and how that affects our trees. And we are lucky enough to be on the undergrounding task force with the mayor, so we were able to put a lot of input into that as that was forming and working its way through, and that'll start to come through. I think there's about 60 sites that are planned for underground the primary wire, so that should help when we have these large storms and the length of time the outages. But back to the brochure, everything's in here. We have our section on adopting street trees, which we're going to get summer interns here shortly. They're going to go around to the new trees that are planted and hang some tags in some specific areas where you can take your smartphone and read the barcode, or the QR code, I should say, and adopt the tree right there on the spot, fill out the form. And that way you can help us water. We'll give you a watering bag, and you can fill that. What we're hoping is once a week or once every other week. We also have our contractor watering twice a month, but we're looking for help to supplement. This year it's been great. We really haven't needed it at all, to be honest with you. It's been the best spring from a tree planting standpoint that we've had in years, so if it stays like this all summer, I would be ecstatic. Or you can sign up here and just mail it in the old way. You can go online and fill it out, trying to hit all generations. Our services are on here. We do pruning, removal, planting, emergency response. We also manage elm trees for Dutch elm disease, so we do injections and inspections to make sure that we're managing the spread of Dutch elm disease, which is still going on. And we also manage the female ginkgo trees, which is not too bad over here, but maybe on the other side of Connecticut there's a few spots where we're still spraying female ginkgo trees so that they don't produce the fruit and have the issue with the odor and the staining and stuff that comes from them. Yeah, they're pretty messy. Permits, everything that comes through. We also encourage people, if you have a private property, to private property issue, where a neighbor's tree is bothering your property or you or any part of your land. We really recommend the multi-door dispute process, and that's listed in our brochure. There's not much we can do between two private property issues, but we can only if they're taking down a tree that should be permitted and it doesn't have permits. But if it's just general nuisance, the best place to go is through this open door dispute, and it'll help you get through that process. What else is in here? Permitting and policies. So in here it also goes through our Urban Forest Preservation Act, which is here you have the tree and slope overlay, which restricts the amount of trees you can remove and what you can do to develop on certain parcels that are adjacent to the park. But the Urban Forest Preservation Act hits every parcel in the city. And if you want to remove a tree, you need a permit if it's greater than 55 inches through our office before you make that removal. You can check the permit off and we'll come and our staff will inspect the tree and provide guidance from there, so there's limited cost. It's $35 an inch if it's healthy, and that's to protect our canopy. We're trying to keep the canopy we have at 36-ish, 37%. Trying to get to 40 in 20 years. The only way we're going to do it is not taking down some of the trees that are coming down through development and other ways. So if you don't fill out the permit, the fines are $100 an inch. So it's pretty significant. It's easier to pay the $35 and get the permit and go through our office than it is to go the other route. The other thing we talked about a little bit is the beautification of tree box spaces. Not necessarily a law, it's more a regulation. It's been on the books since the early 80s. We're in the process of rewriting that a little bit because it's not as tree friendly as we'd like it to be. And we just want to make sure that first and foremost we can get healthy trees growing before we worry about companion planting or other plants maybe in that same space. And continuous strips in the residential area, that's a little different because there's a lot of soil space and soil volume, but it's the individual tree pits that tend to be more of a challenge. Science has shown that the more soil volume you can provide for a tree, the larger it's going to get, and it's a bell curve. If you have only so much soil, it's going to grow this big and then start to decline and fall off again. So the more soil we can get to that street tree, more water it gets, more nutrients, and we're trying to limit that. But the brochure pretty much has everything. If it doesn't answer your question, then our address, phone number, everything's on the back. There's someone there every day by those phones and ready to address or answer any of your questions. Now the fun part, I guess, open mic night or questions that you guys might have.
Yeah, so I guess if commissioners have some quick questions.
I'm sorry to have my back to you, but
Sure.
trying to.
We'll start with Manoli and work our way around.
John, thanks for coming tonight.
No problem.
I appreciate taking the evening, and also want to thank Vera Ertum, the Ward 3 arborist. She's been very helpful on a number of occasions. It's been interesting, while I've been with the ANC, to understand how to navigate the sort of tree oversight structure. I want to just make sure I understand it. So street trees are you.
Correct.
Trees at schools are DGS,
Correct.
but you work with them.
Yes, they don't have any technical staff, so
Okay.
we work.
Or money.
Or money. Yes, that's,
Okay.
yeah, I should say.
And then trees at parks are DPR?
No, all DPR land went to DGS for management
for
of the
DGS.
land, but
Okay.
there is some. I think probably we'd work closely more with the Friends of groups in some of the parks
Got it.
more than we would necessarily DPR, but we still work to inform DPR what's going on.
But then, so you do work closely with DGS on the trees
Correct.
at schools?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then obviously, I suppose on other city or
Yeah,
DC
fire
properties.
stations,
Okay.
police stations, you name it.
All right.
Everything but libraries and housing, because they have their own contractual authority. There's a matrix somewhere that you can probably.
And then private properties.
Yeah, and then private property is also us for the tree bill.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
John, I want to thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
You've been great. Vera did a great job. But a client and friend of mine that are not my ANC, they got a tree down dealing with Pepco. He did a very good job on that. Many years of trying to get it down. And also trees in my area that you are taking care of. Thank you. And thank Mike. I had questions from some constituents. They want to know what the overall health of our ANC trees are, our specific ANC, and what the goals and objectives are along Connecticut Avenue in replacing the very large-scale trees that are declining, and how we're going to solve that over the years, more long-term information than the short-term.
Okay. Yeah, so in general, the citywide tree canopy we have, it's a younger canopy, which is good in a way, but we kind of have both. We have very young and very old, and we're a little light in the middle. Some of that just came from years where we didn't have any money in the district, and we were kind of having some troubles. We stopped planting trees and stopped doing a lot of tree maintenance. And so the problem with trees is once you stop, you really can't make up for that lost time. So that's why we're trying to plant every year at least a certain number of trees so we can keep what we have. I can send a specific report for each ANC group or the whole ANC of the breakdown of the top species. Typically, it's everywhere. Maples are the top, just because back in the 70s and 80s, maples were cheap. They were easy to buy. They were everywhere. Every nurseryman had them. So all the different varieties of red and sugar. We typically don't plant maples anymore. They're a species that likes water, and obviously this is a year that maybe is a good year for a maple, but typically the dry summer heat is not good for them. It stresses them out. They don't really achieve a certain level that we'd like, but we are inundated with maples citywide, and so we're working to clean those out as they hit a point of decline and bring in new species. Last year we planted 142 different species, so it's a big departure from the L'Enfant plan, which was very limited. Block after block of the same species, right? Dutch elm disease came and we lost entire streets of trees or blocks. Rhode Island from this inner city all the way out to Maryland was lost of all elm trees. So we're trying to avoid that. We're even having biodiversity within the block, so if there's something that happens, we have still some canopy. But the overall health is good. We have probably 89% of the trees in a good or excellent condition. The rest are in a fair or poor. Poor is typically heading toward death, and we're going to get them out of the system. Fair is where we can maybe do some pruning to still save them, or maybe that we just, by not touching them, we're just going to let them go for another 5 or 6 years before they reach that poor level. As far as large trees, and specifically, say, Connecticut Ave, the commercial corridors are very challenging just because of the delivery trucks, the curb cuts, the parking, the changes in parking, and just all of the activity that happens on that curb face. And it's been very challenging to get trees established in those areas, so putting new trees back has been difficult, and keeping old trees alive because as you probably drive around, you can see the damage that the buttress roots along the curb face take. And repeated hits by trucks and delivery men or just even car doors creates that situation where disease and decay starts, and there's really not much we can do for it once that sets in. But on the other side, there's new exciting materials that we're using. We're using FlexiPave, which is a pervious, flexible paving material. And what that's doing is allowing us to have better bus stop, tree, parking meter interactions, or ADA. Someone was talking about ADA before. We're now able to resolve ADA issues and tree issues and keep the tree, whereas in the past the first thing was that we got to remove the tree to fix the ADA issue. And so this is something we're going to start deploying. It's in the same contract that was probably fixing your areas. It's really for when, yeah.
Decided not to use it.
Okay, it's much more expensive, so we're kind of very picky with it a little bit. It will come down in pricing as time goes on, and more people use it, but it's been highly effective. We used it all over already, and it's really helped us save. And what it does is it allows us to aerate the soil. With air spades, we actually go through and blow out the soil down about 4 or 5 inches, and then we backfill with organic matter, and then able to reset the base and pour this. It's poured cold, so it doesn't hurt the trees, and then it forms this hard rubberized surface that allows water to drain right through. So the water then gets into the root system, whereas the concrete basically, as you watch it, it sends the water back to the storm drain and down into the river. So as the price comes down, I think it'll be something we use more often in more places. Mixing up the species, so we know certain species are going to do well in like a Connecticut Ave corridor where old red oaks just were not a tree that was really good for that. Maples were not a good tree, but some of the new elm varieties are very strong, very aggressive. In a good way, if you put a weedy-ish style tree or species in a very difficult environment, you can kind of control its behavior a little bit because it's stressed out, but it's able to be be a little more aggressive so it lives better through that stress. If you put something that's slow growing in that stressful environment, it's going to be even slower. We're looking at ways of expanding the tree boxes so that they're bigger, giving that more soil volume. Our office we got some money through this when there was the stimulus money going around, and we were able to remove about 3 or 4 acres of paved surface throughout the district by expanding tree boxes all over. In commercial areas are one area that we're really working on to try to find partnership with the businesses and the parking and all the issues that go on using that 10 or 15 foot of space and still give that tree some room to grow. And between the traffic lights and stop signs and all that stuff, it becomes a real space issue basically, and how can we squeeze these trees in and still allow for that sight line. But we have a landscape architect on staff, and all she does is work on these streetscape projects and streetscape problems. So anytime our construction group is doing something, say UDC along Connecticut Ave or any of the new buildings that might go on, and they're tearing down the one building and I'm assuming something's going to come back, all of that will go through our office, and we will comment on making sure that there are continuous root zones, continuous root strips, and that there are trees, and the spacing, we try to bring the spacing down to 30 foot along those commercial corridors if we can.
Check the Sauls project.
All right.
Because they are actually talking about red oaks going in.
Yeah, it's
So, I
great
know
tree
you're
for
on
the
the list to
residential,
check
but
them.
yeah, Sharon, she'll
Yeah.
make a kind comment to adjust the species.
Okay.
Yeah, great tree, just not the best place for it.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, but a very good residential where you don't have as much of that curb traffic, because they have a very enlarged buttress root system, so it doesn't do well with car doors when you have that parking and curb line.
Well, I have some other questions.
Yeah,
but
go.
I know they got questions,
I-
and
I-
we can do that on our walkabout, so thank you.
I've got all night.
We don't.
Probably
We have
not.
other items.
Karen, you have any
I
questions?
You
do,
got it.
I have a couple.
Sure.
One of my concerns, I've noticed at some of the high-rise buildings on some of the side streets, and the managers have taken down large trees without permits. Do you have photographic stuff as to where the trees were if we were to file a complaint?
We don't, but we do. We have all of our street trees in a
I'm not talking
GIS.
street trees,
But
I'm talking-
private trees, we can go to Google Earth, and they're about a year behind, and
Oh, good.
you
Okay,
can
so
typically
we
get
can contact you.
a view there and see what was there.
Okay. My other question for you. When Commissioner Bardeen was on our ANC, former Commissioner Bardeen, we fought hard for a tree and slope overlay.
Mhm.
And the zoning commission gave us, and I don't know whether you want to call it a heavy and a light, it was a two-pronged, basically, overlay. In spite of it, we are still losing trees and tree canopy in our ANC. What can we do?
I think this is the challenge.
Either through the zoning commission or through your offices?
Every city in the country right now is with the urban push that's happening. Portland, Oregon just put out their big tree bill, and it's very good, but it's extremely cumbersome. It's not plug and play. It's really difficult. It's a gigantic mathematical figure for developers, and it's all these fees. And I think the tree and slope overlay was a good, easy to understand tool to implement that does protect trees. And then if you combine that with the tree bill, you get some deterrent, I guess, out of the tree bill. It's best. We can't restrict people with the tree bill. We just have to make them pay. That's all. Despite just having a don't remove trees, there's really no. What we would argue for if we had a chance would be at a certain height or certain size of a tree, you just cannot remove it, and that would be better than trying to have paying for more trees that are smaller in size if you were trying to remove them. Having a restriction on something 75 inches and greater would be something that I think would be more effective. Zoning and development and all the stuff that goes with that's a very difficult. It's all part of the tax equation, and getting people to improve their properties to increase the taxes and try to find a way to balance that with canopy is challenging. There's no city has like a lock on tree, like where you just cannot remove a tree. There's no one that has that because they know that that's not an incentive for development. So it's trying to have as many restrictions, but also providing some options too, so that there's ways to, and there's zoning is, you have to remember, zoning hasn't been rewritten here in 55 years or 54 years or whatever, so that's being done now. In that is green area ratio concepts, which are when you redevelop, and granted they will only be applied to newer development, but it will require them to have certain setbacks and set-asides and landscaped areas and trees, and so you'll see these next round of development, when that passes, will have a more green appearance. But that's already happening too. Developers are kind of onto that now. We're getting green roofs all the time. LEED buildings are kind of the norm, sort of, that are coming through, and it's not as hard as it used to be.
Thanks. I have no questions.
I have no questions.
A number of the trees I see have various colored dots on them. Can you explain what those colors mean?
Yeah, the only dot color we use is orange or reddish orange, depending on how long it's been there. But we use the same color on the curb, so you may see a dot on a curb. That's just to indicate where we're planting. If there's any other color on the tree, then I don't know who's doing it, but it's not our. It shouldn't be our group.
Yellow dots aren't you then?
Oh, yellow dots. Yes, sorry, I should have thought it. These are female ginkgos. Because when we spray them, you cannot tell the difference between, at night, we spray at night, we can't tell the difference between the males and females, so we need a bright dot to just make sure we hit those trees.
But the orange dots on trees means you're going to cut them down?
Yes, as ANC 4 we were at last week called it the orange mark of death, but it's our last, just to make sure that it's kind of like a surgeon, I guess, writing on your leg to remove your right leg, not your left leg.
And they still don't do it.
We just want to make sure at the last minute, if anyone's worried they're not at the right tree, there's that last visual piece there, just to make sure that they don't take the wrong tree down. But there's all sorts of numbers and maps associated with that tree. It's not just as simple as the dot, but that's just there for that last moment for the chainsaw.
But it gives us a visual clue as to what's
It gives you a
gonna
clue
happen.
that's coming down.
Right.
I
Okay.
think Pepco once in a while will use blue. It's not the foresters that we work with, it's their construction crews. And I've yet to figure out what they're trying to do is mark a tree that may be something they're concerned with, where their pole placement may go, or lines are going to run, and it's really an indication for their foresters to come back and look. But we've asked them repeatedly not to use that, or not to use paint at all, just so there's no confusion. But it should just be orange on the curb, orange on the tree, or yellow if you happen to live in a female ginkgo block.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mary Beth?
John, I'm so glad to meet you. Thank
to
you for
meet you.
being here. This is really helpful. Several questions. First of all, Joey Perez was just such a wonderful ambassador for your program, and
we lost him.
so I just want to, say how much we are grateful for everything that he did. And sorry, he's gone.
Yeah, we still are hurting from his loss.
So, will you be our new point of contact?
Yeah, you
Where
can-
we contacted Joey in the past, you
Yep,
would be
you
our
can
person.
contact
Okay.
me. Yeah.
So, are you familiar with the River Smart program?
Absolutely.
One of the things that they're doing is, the excavation of areas, for example, where they're putting in a rain garden. Then they're going to do an excavation and then put in filtration, I guess like gravel, basically,
Right.
so that the stormwater can be absorbed and not roll into the creek. I was thinking about how can we apply that to our tree boxes? Is there a way to do something similar? I mean, obviously, if there's already a healthy tree, then we don't want to dig it up. But there's so many stretches in our corridor of Connecticut Avenue with just awful, sad, empty tree boxes.
Right.
Is there a way for y'all to excavate those and?
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff on it. The FlexiFade we talked about is not that, but it does the same thing, but it provides the level surface if it's needed. If you've been anywhere on First Street, northeast, and in the Noman area, where a lot of the installations there have been these infiltrate tree box concepts, where stormwater comes in from the curb cut, and then it's kind of like a salmon run down through the tree boxes and then back out the last one, and any leftover will go into the storm system. Yards Park down in Capitol Hill. They also have, they're probably as big as these 3 tables put together, and and the tree is planted about 4 feet down, and the water just literally dumps and fills up and drains back down. And the only problem with those, they're very hard to retrofit. They're kind of, it's very engineering. It's a lot of engineering. You have to have under drains. You have to make sure that you have the blow drain, so if it does back up, there's a way for water to get out. Otherwise, DC Water's not going to be happy about having plug drains. And then eventually, over time, what we're going to have to do is replace that soil and tree because it's going to be so contaminated by catching all the road water. But there are cheaper, low-impact ways of doing it, and that's kind of our next frontier, is how do we incorporate those. We need the problem with that is it typically needs a fence or some other protection, because you start to get into the ADA issue where you have a change in grade or a trip hazard, and so all of that comes with it. You got to do fencing. You've got to do the whole. You still have to do an under drain in most cases, because just in case you have the 100-year storm. But yeah, we can. I know I wasn't there for the walkthrough that Joe and he's gone, but I can come back out and we can refresh that
That would be great.
and make sure that we stay on track.
I know lots of people are interested in doing
And
another
we're getting
walkthrough.
grant money. We apply for it all the time to do retrofitting and do this stuff. So what our main goal with that money is to try to find people who are interested in it, because not everyone's as interested in trees as the next person. So when we find groups that are, and we get grant money, we're more apt to come try some of these newer things there, because at least we don't have the rub with the community. We want to be able to put it somewhere where people are going to be happy about it.
What kind of trees do you plant in the, you call this rain gardens, but you may call them?
You use species that are able to withstand either poor water quality or able to withstand high water levels. So a lot of our trees, like Dawn Redwood, is a tree that we're starting to plant in the last 5 to 8 years, and it's doing great. And same with Swamp White Oak. They are, if you were to go see them in their natural habitat, they'd be growing in water, which is basically anaerobic. But if you put them in a compacted urban soil, it's the same concept. They're not getting oxygen. They don't need to be sitting in water. They just need to be in an anaerobic atmosphere or an anaerobic environment. So we're bringing a lot of those trees into the urban environment, and they're doing really well because they can deal with the compact soils and live. So you have to just know, if we're going to have a sunken tree box, we're going to look for species that can handle anaerobic conditions or can handle this maybe heavy metals, or I wouldn't say it's heavy metals, but certainly pollutants, and not die.
I have a minor question.
Sure.
I've noticed a number of ginkgos around my neighborhood. At the base of them, there's kind of a ring of small plastic pieces insert into the bark. Do you know what that
Oh,
might be?
yeah. Okay. So we're the only place in the country that you can spray female ginkgos with what we spray, which is sprout nip. It's on every commercially grown potato that you eat, unless you grow it or it's organic. What it does is after they grow the potato, they dip it in this, and it stops the eyes from forming and budding out by the time it gets to the grocery store. That does the same thing when we spray it on a female ginkgo tree. It stops that fruit from producing. It falls off, and we don't have the fruit. Spraying in an urban environment we'd rather not do it. It's just spraying in general around people is a bad idea. It uses thousands, like we figured it out one year, is about 90,000 gallons of fresh water to do it. So it's just a general waste of water, and can be highly ineffective on a windy night or anything. So we went to an injection concept that a company came out with, and it failed miserably. And you put these plastic things in and you inject, and it supposedly would be taken up by the tree and do the same thing, and it was like the opposite. We usually have a 99% success. We had 99% failure.
3700 block of Cumberland has
Oh, yeah.
a lot of ginkgos, and they are dropping their fruit.
Yeah.
Is there any way that they complain about that block? I have
That's one
friends
block.
on that
We
block,
make
and-
sure we go back and check that it worked.
Yeah.
We know the spray works when you go back and there'll be these inch-long green, like little stems laying all over the sidewalk and curb, and that's indication that the spray actually worked. And that was probably a month and a half ago now, but we went around and checked all our big blocks that are really ginkgo blocks, and it looks like everything worked, even though this was a really tough spring because it was cold, hot, wet. We sprayed the whole city in 2 nights.
I just have one last thing very
Sure.
quickly. I'm glad to hear you're getting grant money because there's something, I'd like to put a tree on your list for preservation. There's a tree east of Connecticut Avenue on Wyndham Place. That's probably 100 years old and none of us know how it's surviving because
all
there's
in
like no
concrete.
soil around it. It's all concrete. So somewhere it's getting,
Unbelievable.
All
it's
right.
unbelievable.
I'll drive by it on the way
It's,
home
you know
tonight.
what Calvert Woodley is?
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
right
it's
next
in
to
the middle?
Calvert
Woodley in the mini park. We're
Yeah.
discussing a window.
I'd like to put that list, that tree
It's
on your
probably
list
when
to
you-
preserve somehow.
Yeah, when you see an anomaly like
historic
that, it's
tree.
it's probably got a leaky sewer nearby or a leaky storm drain.
Whatever,
getting-
can you leave the leaky storm
Whatever
drain
it
then?
is, leave
Yeah,
it.
sometimes fixing old infrastructure is not necessarily going to be tree friendly
But
because we've
please
seen
take a
trees
look at
dry
that
up.
tree because
Yeah.
for some reason it survives on nothing and it still looks healthy.
And dandelions at the bottom.
Yeah,
Don't see
I'm
that
sure
on
it's
our
a
wall.
I'm sure it's a leaky water system underneath that's getting water to it. It's the only tree of that size takes 250 gallons of water a day, so it's getting it from somewhere. Unless there's a natural aquifer there that we don't know about.
Great. So I guess, given the timing, does anyone in the audience have a question? Maybe we'll take like one question or two.
Very quickly, David,
David, a very quick question.
and quick answers, please.
Yes, yes. Sorry,
that
I'm a talker.
microphone is not mine, so just
Oh.
if you don't mind, or you can just use hers.
David and I go way back. How you doing, David?
It's terrific, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, that you invited John Thomas here. I have a comment and a question. The community ought to know that this gentleman is the man in charge of the Urban Forestry Administration. He is the Associate Director of DDOT. He reports directly to Director Bellamy, and if you ever ask Director Bellamy of anything about trees, he says, go talk to John Thomas. Mr. Thomas and his team are doing a terrific job. A better job today than was done a few years ago, and they'll be doing an even better one a few years from now than that. If we would ask him to talk about all the things he has in his mind and in progress and expects to accomplish the next year or two, you'd be here all night, so I won't ask him that. What I would like, and I do hope you'll invite him again next year, let him tell you about his progress, but the question I'd like to ask about, and it's your preliminary thoughts, maybe your philosophic ones more than the details, because you haven't announced any details, I know. The mayor is very interested, as we see in the Sustainable DC plan, in making this a greener city and a city full of green jobs. People who are earning their living, helping us enjoy life better, quality of life, doing work on it. Could you comment in any kind of preliminary way on where do you think that's going and what we ought to be looking for over the next year or two?
Sure. Well, thank you for your kind words. I think three things that we're doing. Anything to do with LID and stormwater water quality and the green components that go with it are allowing people to have both the engineering and mathematical side of things for training, as well as the green side and biology and botany that comes with it. So it's a very well-rounded, and from that you can go to different parts. You can take your engineering piece and go do traditional engineering, or you can do traditional horticulture. UDC is doing great stuff with urban agriculture, and I think that's a big thing that's coming in the future. Other things that we're doing in our department, we capture honeybees. So we get reports all the time of wild swarms. We go and we capture them and we put them in hives, and we're up to 9 hives throughout the city. Our goal is eventually to have as many hives as we can manage and turn that honey and give it to like Bread for the City and have them use it for urban agriculture as well. And I think the next thing for us is we've been planting quietly little fruit orchards all over where we have triangles of leftover road. And we're gonna try to find the right combination of fruit or nut trees that we could put in an urban environment and be successful, not having a big rat population, but actually having food that we could harvest. When you get into all those things, it's a whole different skill set that's needed. It's much more intensive, and I think just any food production in the urban environment is going to be big in the next 20 years, because we're learning how to do things in very small spaces that we don't need acres and acres of land to do it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so
we
much.
appreciate it. If you have questions, what's your email for everyone?
Oh, yeah. My personal email is john.pthomas, so the dot's before the P, at dc.gov. And then you can call our office anytime, 202-671-5133, and there's always someone 8 to 5 there by the phone, and they'll get you to somebody that can help you or at least take your information. We'll call you back.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget your brochures. And we did send Sally a list of all the work that's planned in your ANCs, the map, and I'll forward that email to her, and she can pass it around. And that's
Okay, we'll put it on our list.
it's like the
Okay.
next 3-month work plan, but gives you an
Thank you.
idea.
Okay,
Perfect.
great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. So next item up is discussion and possible resolution regarding historic designation application for 3530 Springland Lane Northwest. So I guess I was asked by the owners and the Springland Farm Historical Society and Conservancy group to possibly discuss this application. So I guess what probably makes sense is if there's someone from the Springland Farm Historical Society that filed the application to maybe give a 5-minute talk about their application and why this house needs to be designated a historic house. I would appreciate it. And then I received from a member of that group a testimony, which I'll read. It's like 2 paragraphs long. So is there someone here from that group that wishes to speak at all? They can come up if they want to the microphone.
My name is Scott Siff. I'm not actually a member of the group, but the person that gave you the testimony just had surgery, and so he was not able to be here tonight, which is why, Adam, he sent you his written testimony in place of his appearance.
Oh, okay.
here. So that's.
So I can just read that for him. So quickly, this was submitted by Dr. Brent Blackwelder, who is with the Springland Farm Historical Society, which made this filing. So here is what he wrote. He says a raised permit for 3530 Springland Lane is not in the public interest, nor is it in the interest of the residents of the neighborhood for historical and environmental reasons. The owners will eliminate a historic house tied to the first settlers of the area, along with the construction of a much larger one. Actions that remove large trees and that have the potential to harm the water quality and quantity of the headwaters of Adlam Spring Run, a tributary of Rock Creek, if construction goes deeper than the current basement or if bad storm events hit during construction. The just completed report Hydrology of Springland Lane by Stephen Amter, Senior Scientist of Disposal Safety Incorporated, concludes, based on information available to me at this time, including the plan to build a full basement within a few feet of the spring, I conclude that there is likely to be significant effect on the spring and creek, possibly including a significant reduction in flow volume. The magnitude of the effect will depend on details of the construction. I also conclude that the creek is vulnerable to physical alterations during construction and needs to be protected from silt-laden runoff, excavation, dewatering fluids, and high pH water from cement mixing. And then lastly, he noted 4 points in this report that this group had done. First point was the proposed new house would have a full basement and be constructed 25 feet north of the existing one, putting it immediately adjacent to the spring and pool. A geotechnical engineering firm working with the architects recommends an extensive subsurface drain system to protect the basement from infiltrating groundwater. The second point in this assessment was, as planned, the construction will alter the groundwater flow regime associated with the spring, probably reducing its flow and possibly even drying it out entirely. The degree of reduction in flow is highly dependent on the depth and location of the basement and type of foundation installed. Third point is the loss of flow in the spring can be reduced by stepping back the house or the basement, minimizing the depth of the basement, and using helical piers or some other construction alternative instead of a continuous foundation wall. And then the last point in this study they had commissioned was, because of its small size, Adlam Spring Run is extremely vulnerable to excessive silt and chemical loading. Thus, measures must be taken to protect the spring and the creek during excavation and construction. So that is what the society that filed the application sent me because they're unable to be here in person. I guess, how should we do this? So I guess if the people, there's some people representing the homeowners, if they want to chat a few minutes about the historical nature of the home and the application, and then maybe we could just open it up to people who want to talk in favor of it or against it. If that works for everyone. Any commissioners have any problem with that?
I don't know, let me hear this, and then I don't know if we'll need anybody else.
Okay. We'll let people
Thank
that
you.
came speak. So if you
Hi,
could
I'm-
introduce yourself and
Thank you.
tell us more.
I'm Ralph Cunningham from Cunningham Coil Architects here in Washington, and we are based in Georgetown. I live in Cleveland Park. Very, very familiar with this site. I am here to represent our clients, Greg Lacascio and Amy Dixon. I want to try to separate some of the issues that are in the note. As I'm sure you're aware, the landmark application has to do with the historic significance of the property. It actually has nothing to do with the stream. We will be required to protect the stream. There's no question about that. We have done extensive hydrology studies. We've worked with Army Corps of Engineers. We've worked with our own engineers, et cetera. So that as an issue is certainly one of concern. I don't want to dismiss it at all. But I would point out to you that the existing house on the site has largely been destroyed by groundwater. So the issues along Springland Lane of groundwater are clearly very, very important. And certainly our client doesn't want to spend several $1 million on a new house to have it destroyed by stormwater or to affect the stream that's directly in their front yard. So it's certainly to their interest to protect it, and we will continue to work with DC DOE and also with Army Corps to protect the stream. With regards to the historic designation, we forwarded to you the report from HT Traceries. There's really no evidence that the house is a landmark in compliance with the DC preservation law. And so, you know, I could stand here and give a long presentation about that, but I don't think that's necessary. I will very much caution you all to think about this carefully because obviously there are underlying property rights and all kinds of things, but you know, preservation is really not supposed to be a tool that's used to prevent something like this from happening. This is a client who bought this house. He has 2 small children, wants to live here the rest of his life, wants to build the kind of house that he wants to have. Perfectly allowed by zoning. We're not asking for any zoning relief at all. You know, he feels strongly about, you know, this is his dream house, and we certainly, as architects, are trying to help him to achieve that. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I guess what we could do first is maybe we'll have the people from the community speak, and then maybe we'll ask questions.
I have something
If that works. Karen, you have something quickly to talk
I
about?
think what I was going to say was, I think we're here for historic designation, and the building permit process is actually where you get into hydrology reports. Our ANC gets a copy once they file for their building permit. That's where I think we make any recommendations. You know, we can ask that the permit, and so can the neighborhood actually, ask that these things be considered in that permit process and get them resolved. So I think the real issue here is you know, not the stream, it's historic designation and whether that house is historic. I've checked with the Cleveland Park Citizens Association. They didn't seem to feel it was historic and didn't want to include it in their overlay, even though their overlay is carved out right around this particular house. So I'm not, you know, unless the neighborhood is planning on designating all of Springland as historic, I don't see how this one house is historic. So I guess I was going to go ahead, and if the neighbors don't mind, and I don't know who's here to speak for or against it, and make a motion that we not take a position on this and that we wait for the building permit process where we can have input.
Okay. I guess, was there a second of the commissioners for that motion? I will second, but yeah, but you can come on up and speak now, I guess. So if you're a member of the public that wishes to speak for or against this, or whatever else about it, you can come on up, just introduce yourself, and you can speak on that, and then we'll discuss the motion more in depth.
Thanks. I've introduced myself. Sorry, Scott Siff. In answer to your point, the reason we're feeling some sense of urgency, even at this early stage, is because there's a permit to raise the house. And so there's the historic issue, which I'll address in 1 second, but you sort of crossed the Rubicon in terms of the impacts on the stream and everything else once the raised permit happens. At that point, you sort of have led the owner sort of down the garden path a little by allowing them to take down the house on the assumption that they could build a new house, which I think the evidence is it has a high likelihood of having a significant impact on the stream, in which case the owner then is at a bad place because they have no house, they can no longer fix up the old house, and they can't build possibly the new house they had envisioned. So that's why we're teeing this up now. I think there's really 3 issues that are of concern to the neighborhood. The first one is the groundwater issue. As we mentioned, as Ralph mentioned, the plan is to move the house right up against the edge, the new house after the current house is taken down, right up against the edge of where the groundwater bubbles up and creates this creek, this stream. The stream is of particular importance to the entire street. I have several other neighborhoods, myself as well, who have significantly landscaped their yards along this creek, which always has water in it. It always has. We have the people we bought the house from grew up there. They said that there's always a flow of water in the street, and the stream bubbles up right where they're going to build the house, within feet of where the new house will be located. And the plan for the new house is to build it's going to be an almost 13,000 square foot house with a 4,500 square foot basement, so you'll have a 10-foot, 12-foot sink into the ground, basically creating a dam between the upstream water and the headwaters of this creek, which flows into Melvin Hayes and into Rock Creek. That's one part of the groundwater. The other part is that the uphill neighbors, including Brent Blackwelder and his folks who are above the house, uphill, are very concerned that by changing the dynamics of the groundwater, which is contained in the groundwater report, there's a high risk of affecting trees not on their property by changing the water flow. We heard of the complexities of water issues from John before, and then also potentially endangering their foundations, which we saw with some of the houses on Reno a little farther south when they did the work at the National Cathedral School, and a bunch of the foundations cracked because of just changing in the dynamics of the groundwater. Those are the water issues. The second issue is trees. Again, we heard a lot about trees. There are 4 enormous trees, 3 beautiful oaks, white oaks, and an incredible beech, 100-foot plus trees, all of which are coming down, at least 2 of them to expand a parking pad on one side of the house, 2 other ones just to landscape the backyard a little bit differently from how it's currently being landscaped. So on that point, we would encourage the ANC to, whatever it can do to exert its influence to do some tweaking to the plans to save these 4 gorgeous, huge, and very old trees that are being taken, that will be cut down. The third issue is the land historical designation on the house. This house is really the cornerstone. It's the anchor of this cul-de-sac, this relatively small cul-de-sac. As Brent mentions in his testimony, it's part of a family that's been in D.C. They were one of the very first families to settle in D.C., Major Adlam. The farmhouse where he lived is just up the hill. There's a historically designated spring house that's just sort of catty corner across the street from this house. And this house that we're talking about was the last residence of the last member of that family to live in this neighborhood where they've been living for 250 years. And the house itself is a beautiful house by a very noted DC architect. All of that's laid out in a lot more detail in Brent's historical, or the Historic Society's designation application. So on those three issues, so the first issue, again, the water, we would encourage the ANC to do whatever it can now, not wait till the house is taken down, to have the water issues looked at really thoroughly, so we don't get into a situation where the owners have taken down the house and then we start looking at the water issues and we have them sort of halfway through this process and in a very bad situation then. From talking to the owner, they did thorough consideration and were very close apparently at different points to renovating the current house, which would avoid all of these problems with some additions in the back away from the stream. According to him, to what he told me, it was a relatively close call. They ultimately decided to build this new house. They wanted to have the extra square footage, I guess, and have a new house. As I mentioned, it'll turn into a almost 13,000 square foot house from less than half of that now. So that's first. Second is on the trees, to do whatever we can to save these incredible trees that are, visible from this entire street. And last is to to send a letter in support of the historical designation for this property, which is the last built property of this famous DC family, historical family, and beautiful noted historical architect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Are there any other persons in the audience that wish to speak on either side about this historic designation application?
I would like to.
Are there any commissioners that have a question for, well, I guess if no one from the applicants are here, maybe elicit, or for the owners.
I think I would like to just respond to what you said, because I think it might solve some of the problems. I think it's not on our agenda tonight, but the ANC can weigh in on the raised permit itself, which is issued through DCRA, without getting into historic designation. And what I was going to suggest was that perhaps we separate the two items. One, and I would make a motion that we send a letter to DCRA expressing our concern on the raised permit, attaching this hydrology report, and enumerating what our concerns are should the raised permit be issued and historic designation not be granted. Because that's where the raised permit and the stream would come into play. Because they can, the DCRA can condition the raised permit on the contractor or the applicant doing certain things to protect that stream. So that would be one thing I would suggest as a motion, that we send such a letter.
Can something about the conditions being placed on the trees?
Yes, we can do, that's
well?
all part of, no, the other part comes in the building permit. But the raised permit is just for the house.
Just for the house, okay.
And that's where we can express the concerns of the stream.
Okay, got it.
And attach the hydrology report and ask that conditions be attached to the permit itself. And DCRA can do that. The second part is historic designation as to whether the house is historic or not. So I think we need to separate the two is what I guess I'm saying. So I would make a motion that we send two motions. One, that we send a letter to DCRA regarding the raised permit expressing our concerns should the house not be granted historic designation, because if it's granted historic designation, there won't be a raised permit.
Why don't we deal with the first motion that's already on the floor?
Yeah, and my first motion would be that we not take a position on historic designation.
Okay, so the first motion that we send a letter to HPRB saying that we take no position on this application was presented by Karen, seconded by myself. Is there any discussion of commissioners at all on that? We'll start with Manoli and work our way down, or whoever.
The only question I have is whether or not there's been any, we're we're talking about the last living descendant of Major Adams' family living at this property, whether or not there's been any attempt to designate the house where he lived as a historic. Is it?
Is that that might be the.
I didn't catch that in the filing and was not aware of it, so I just.
I believe it's a house up on Tilden. At that cul-de-sac.
Okay.
I'm not sure though.
Do you know? You may. So this is Maria Casarella. She's actually a member of HPRB.
I'm actually here today. I'm a project architect.
As
for
a project
Spring Lane,
architect.
And was intending not to speak, but we have done a historic assessment report on the property.
Can you get closer to the microphone, so?
Or you can remove
We're-
it if you want.
And through traceries, which many of you know as an authority on historic designations and landmark applications. So we were, firstly, I'd like to say that the nomination submitted by Mr. Sift and others does not meet any of the criteria that the DC registration requires. And that your information regarding Adlam.
Sorry, can I interrupt just as
yes.
a point of order? Are you speaking on behalf of
On
the
behalf of
project,
the
or
owner.
so are you recusing yourself from HPA?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to make
So
sure
I will not
understood.
be voting on this. I've
Okay.
not spoken
Just wanted to
to
understand
any
your
board
statement.
members about this project, but I happen to be the project architect, and I happen to have some experience in reading nominations, understanding the process. So Major Adlam's house does not exist, and through our research, and we had sent to you last month an extensive report, an assessment, which really describes what the history of the project as a series of speculative developments by a family and its descendants over the years. And that Springland Lane really represents one of those parcels. The fact that a very distant familial descendant of Major Adlam, who was a revolutionary vintner of the area, and many of you know the story behind that, who had a vast farmland property that pretty much by the mid-19th century was no longer present, and he had one heir that was present, which is now the Springland Farmhouse, and that has been designated as well as the well and the stone structure on Springland Lane. Those have been designated, and that is really the end of the line there. The descendants through marriages, and we provided you a family tree of how the previous owner of Springland Lane had threaded through all this. There was no intention in the development of Springland Lane in the early 20th century to have any connection with Major Adlam's property. So if you go through all the criteria, which there are 5 or 6, events, history, individuals, artistry, etc., this nomination is so poorly done, it does not describe or demonstrate that this house and property meets any of the criteria. So to your question, Major Adlam's property does not exist and hasn't existed for over a century and more, and nor does the house, which was mentioned, the original house.
But you're saying the spring house does?
The spring house
I want to be
exists.
sure and that
that is part of the landmark.
historical already?
Yes, and when the spring house and the Springland Farmhouse, which is actually up Tilden, was designated in 1990, something around there, the area, the streets were already assessed, and this has already been done. This has already been thought through, and it was quite intentional, but none of the other houses were included in this. And there's nothing significant about this house to distinguish it with any connection with the Springland Farmhouse, with the original Adlam Farm, any more so than any other house in Springland Lane. So this is purely an attempt to block the development of a private owner's property. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Does anyone else have questions? Bob?
That's not questions.
Comment, statement, discussion.
I looked through the application, found nothing of significant interest in either the house, the last person that lived there, the architecture, the architect. It's not a particularly remarkable place at all, and I think pretty clearly a dodge to get around development of the property.
Is there any other questions or discussion from commissioners?
I concur.
Okay. Is there any other comments from people in the audience at all on this? Okay, and we've received various emails from some neighbors on this as well, which all the commissioners have read, I assume. I guess at this point, so we have Karen's resolution to send a letter of no. So what is, can you repeat?
Basically, you know, one of the things I always look to is the HPRB staff report, because that's very impartial. It's not an a traceries hired by the owner or the application on the other side. That's why I said, since we don't have that staff report, I would like just to see us not take a position on the historic designation at this time.
Right, and I spoke with the historic preservation officer in charge of it, and he wasn't really willing to tell me what he was doing because it gets released tomorrow. And that was
So
basically
can we
just,
vote to continue this?
since the hearing is next week, that would not work very well. So I guess at this point, since there's no other discussion or questions, we should probably bring Karen's first resolution to a vote. So all in favor of that, say aye.
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 So what do we got?
Voting to not take a position.
I think it was
Are we voting
unanimous.
to not take a position, or are we voting to?
To take no position.
No position.
No.
Okay, so we got 5 and then all against?
I thought it was 7.
Oh, wait, did you?
6.
Oh, okay, my bad. Did you vote?
No, I'm abstaining.
Okay,
Oh,
so
so-
6, all against?
6.
Raise your hand. All abstaining? 1, okay.
601.
601. All right, so we'll just send a letter, I guess, on that. So then your second motion, if you can repeat it.
It was, it was to send a letter to DCRA regarding the raise permit application, expressing concern for the raise and the effect on the stream, et cetera, attaching the hydrology report, and stating what our, what those concerns are, and asking DCRA to put conditions on the raise permit, should the house not be designated historic. Because we can weigh in on the raise permit itself, and to me, that's where the hydrology report comes in, the stream and all of that. So that would be my second motion.
Okay, is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion or questions or anything from commissioners?
Sure.
Bob?
DCRA has clear regs and rules dealing with stormwater and groundwater, and I don't think we need to get into this. We also didn't put this on the agenda, so it's not clear that it would be a legal motion.
From what I understand, we do not have to have everything posted on our agenda. The only thing that has to be posted is the date and time of our meetings. We do not have to list every thing. And as far as DCRA on their raise permit, if you look at the raise permit itself, the only thing on there is that they take down the it's a 2-phase raise permit. The first phase is you apply for the permit, and what they basically do is they make sure that you've turned off the electricity, you've cut the gas. Those are the agencies that sign off on it. Then they go ahead and automatically issue the phase 2, which is the takedown of the house. And I don't think it hurts to just express our concern.
What does it ultimately mean, though?
It means that DCRA in the raise permit process will take our concerns into account and possibly talk to the owners of the property or attach conditions to ensure that the stream and everything are protected in the raise permit in the raise. They can, it basically makes them take a look, more so than in a regular house where all you have to do is to get the raise permit is turn off the electricity, they make sure the water has been turned off, whatever. If they don't care about the underground or the subsurface or whatever you want to call it in a raised permit application. They raise permits all the time. It's basically just a two-step. It just expresses concern, and I think it would help the neighbors and satisfy some of the concerns that have been expressed tonight. I don't think it hurts, in other words.
Most of the neighbors didn't want the historic designation, from what I saw.
I'm not talking about historic designation. I'm talking about the hydrology and the
They
stream.
weren't complaining about that.
Well, we can still take a position on it because we did get from DCRA a copy of the raised permit.
Can that be tabled to enough, so we have
No,
more
because
time
if historic preservation doesn't deem the house historic, then they can issue the raised permit. And you might not get a second crack at the apple, or second bite at the apple.
Is there anyone else wish to speak on this, Mary Beth?
So, so Karen, I don't understand the procedure well enough to even ask this question.
No, it's okay.
But, why does the water issue relate to the raising permit and not to the building permit?
The raised permit is just to take down the house and gut
Right.
it. It doesn't have any protections in it at all for that stream. It just is a blanket. The only thing, it's a two-phase raised permit. Basically, the first phase is to make sure that everything is turned off so that you don't, set a fire or do anything else. And then they issue the raised permit. There's nothing in that requires the contractor doing it to take, to protect the stream or do the basement, because don't forget, there's a basement in this house and everything else. It's just a layer of protection to satisfy, I think, a group of neighbors who are concerned, even as he said, about the raising of the house and protection of the stream.
Isn't the issue with the stream related to the construction of the new house, the 13,000
Well, I think it's
square
also,
foot house?
I think it's also, isn't it, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it also in taking down the house as to what they do and how they take it down?
Yes, that's, the hydrology report talks about the process of the raising could cause silting up of the stream, and also through the disturbance of the earth, just that process itself could affect the flows of the groundwater.
Okay.
And
I thought
that's
it
why
was
I'm
the
saying, just
construction.
as a precaution, I think all we're trying to do is call DCRA's attention to it. So they don't issue their standard raise permit by a clerk the minute the electricity's turned off and whatever. That's all I'm saying.
I think it'd be more appropriate to contact Department of the Environment, see if they have concerns, and if they don't have concerns, I certainly don't.
Well, if I may, just, to be honest, that's one thing that was not entirely clear, that the Department of the Environment has done some sort of assessment, or they agreed with the assessment that was filed by the geotechnical study that was completed by the property owners on contract to the property owners, and then also it received. This is where it starts to get fuzzy from my perspective. Concurrence from the Army Corps of Engineers as well. So I was having a hard time actually getting a straight answer from the Department of the Environment on where they were on this specific site, other than to say that there is a geotechnical report and that it was released through a FOIA to one of the interested parties in the historic preservation, I guess, all the way around. So that's a long way of saying my understanding is the Department of Environment has looked at it. What is not clear to me, and maybe somebody here has a better understanding, what their actual assessment was and what their position is.
It's in the email to us from Marcia. It says, to be clear, the stream has been evaluated professional and governmental authorities and will not be disturbed by the construction.
Well, that's construction. I'm talking raise. He's talking raise.
Right. So I understand now, Karen, what you're saying, and I agree with you. And I think that that it's, it doesn't hurt anything.
It doesn't
to
hurt.
do that.
It might not help, but
and
it
as
doesn't
someone
hurt.
who lives downhill from a major construction process, partially destruction, raising and partial construction, it would have been nice if DCRA had been given a heads up to pay more attention to the issue. So I agree with what Karen's saying.
Anyone else?
Did somebody second your motion?
Vinoli.
Oh,
It-
okay.
Yeah, it is a challenging, a challenge to make this, to assess this properly, given the fact that both of the sets of documents we received
Today, which,
and this has been something that we've been looking at for some time and I've personally been trying to understand the dynamics, especially on the environmental side for some time. It is a frustration to receive these today with the HPRB vote or
without a
hearing next
proper
week. But
presentation by the right authorities and the right agencies. We don't have enough information to make this kind of assessment. I understand what you're saying, and I agree that
It's,
that's
we're
just
not
a
making an assessment.
fail-safe, but
We're not
we have
making an
not
assessment.
been given enough as a commission to even be able to make reasonable judgment on this.
I guess to me, it doesn't hurt just to send something saying that these concerns have been brought to our attention. We'd like DCRA to look at it in evaluating the raised permit, period. It doesn't have to be fancy. We don't have to get into all the things. It just doesn't hurt.
Right.
We're
I
not
agree.
making a judgment on anything. We're just calling their attention to the concerns that were brought to us,
Right.
period.
And we're not commenting on the construction of
No,
the
we're
new
not.
home
It has nothing to
or
do with the
the
construction.
environmental impact.
Or
It's-
environmental
right.
impact. It's
I
just
agree.
these concerns were brought to our attention. We'd like DCRA to take them into account when issuing the raised permit. It's a very simple thing. We're not making a judgment at all.
How fast would they get a raised permit? If
They
this
can get a
goes to the
raised
hearing?
permit within days if it's not
I
designated.
think it's on
It's,
hold, I think.
I
it's
thought it
only
was-
on hold
Until
until
HPRB
HPRB votes,
votes.
and that could be next week.
That's how it works, I think.
Yeah, and that could be next week. Because HPRB usually votes the same day that
And we can't,
they had their
we
hearing.
can't ask for a
No, you cannot, not on this. I guess the thing is, why, I don't understand why if something doesn't hurt, we can't do it.
Well, it hurts the owners by slowing down the whole process.
It doesn't slow down the process for DCRA to take something into account. Somebody can just pick up the letter and say, no concern, period. All we're doing is relaying. Anyway, why don't you?
Okay, so,
I call for the question.
okay, yeah, we'll just repeat the motion, then we'll vote on it. So the motion is to send a letter to DCRA saying that certain residents have expressed concern for the raised permit and the effect on the stream and have provided this hydrology, what do they call it?
Hydrology report.
Hydrogeology report. Can DCRA take this into account when issuing the raised permit?
Well, I would just, I think he listed a couple of things that out of the report that just basically, that's all,
Yeah, the three things that he itemized are on page 2.
on
Well-
page 2.
Yeah.
Can I offer amendment? I think I would struggle with supporting the motion as it stands, where we're only including the contracted work of the group opposed to the
I'm
project.
not saying we put the report in. That's, I just meant the three things
Okay.
that he raised.
Okay,
Okay.
so then, all right, so no report. So then,
That the
so
following,
what are the three things? David, can you repeat
it's
them?
on page 2 of the report.
It's right here. These are the three that
The last 3 bullet points.
groundwater flow, loss of the spring, and size.
Here it is. These three, in the report that they gave us.
Okay, so,
That-
do you want to put them word for word, or you want to just?
The first 2 of those items are about construction of foundation installed. The last one is about excavation and construction.
I think we can work on the letter. But I would agree that we just put in the things that were raised as concerns to us by residents and ask them to take a look at that in granting the in doing the excavation permit.
The trees were on the list.
Trees are during
Yeah, that's
construction.
fine, but let me
That's a
just-
totally
Okay,
different.
so we,
They're not raising trees now, they're just
so
raising the
we're gonna
house.
send a letter to DCRA expressing concern with the raised permit for 3530.
Saying residents have come expressing,
Residents?
yeah. I want to put it that these
Okay.
concerns were,
Have come to the ANC to express concern regarding the raised permits of 3530 Springland Lane.
I would just say express the following concerns and list those 3 bullet points. However you want to word them.
Have expressed concerns with groundwater flow, loss of flow to the spring, and silt and chemical loading during excavation and construction. And then
During
we
the
could
raising of
say, accordingly, we would appreciate it if you can take these into consideration when issuing the raised permits.
Uh-huh,
Okay.
that's all. Clean and simple.
All right, so that is, are we good? So is there a second for that final motion I've concocted?
Second.
Okay. Is there any commissioners that have discussion on that, or any members of the public that wish to discuss? Anyone? Okay. So bring the vote on that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
4. All opposed? 2. Abstaining? 1. 4-2-1. Does that pass? It does. Pass. So we'll send a letter to DCRA. Do you have the text there, Rob? Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. All right, thank you. Next topic, discussion and possible resolution regarding the rebuilding of Broad Branch Road. So, Mary Beth, would you like to tell about this and present your resolution?
Oh. No, I'll give you mine in a minute.
Davis, you want?
So as many of you all know, the Department of Transportation has been working on 4 alternatives that would renovate Broad Branch Road. Each of these alternatives involves a different level of renovation. The first alternative would just basically be repairing the road. The second alternative would be a little bit more, involving some stormwater management. The third and fourth alternatives involve various aspects of pedestrian and cycle lanes, as well as rain garden and other stormwater management. The environmental impact statement has not come out yet. It's not expected out for at least another month. Some people have said, why should we pass a resolution when we don't have the environmental impact statement? There are definitely going to be some issues in terms of property owners who don't want a sidewalk or a bike path in the right-of-way that is in their front yard. There are embassies along the route, and it's unclear what role the embassies will play in terms of granting additional right-of-way that might be required for a bike path or pedestrian sidewalk, for example. I still feel that it's time for us to pass a resolution supporting the rehabilitation of Broad Branch Road, despite the fact that there are a lot of outstanding questions. And the reason is, in part, because it's part of the reason I ran for the ANC. We live next to beautiful Rock Creek Park, and we cannot safely access the park. There's really no safe way to send your children to ride their bikes in the park. And I really think it's time for us to do something. I don't know which of those 4 alternatives is going to be right. I don't think the time is right to adopt one of the 4 alternatives. But I do think the time is right to draw attention to this. The entire project falls within my single-member district. It's in our ANC. And in speaking with several other ANCs, they're very interested in the project, but they're looking to us to show leadership. And they're hoping that we will pass something so that they can then engage further on the issue. So the resolution that I propose does not endorse a particular alternative. It just supports the implementation of the reconstruction of Broad Branch Road between Linnean Avenue and Beach Drive that provides residents with a safe way to access Rock Creek Park on bicycle or on foot, and that minimizes stormwater runoff to better protect the adjacent stream bed. I think I will stop right there. I'm sure there'll be a number of questions and comments, but I would just encourage everyone to support this. I've had a lot of constituents. The Van Ness Vision Committee is supportive of the resolution. And as I say, a couple of other ANCs have expressed interest, and I would urge us to show leadership on the issue.
Any commissioners have any comments on this? Is there a second on the motion, I guess?
Second.
Okay, second by Sally. Is there any discussion on the motion? Question? Okay. Anyone from the audience have any thoughts about Broad Branch and this motion? If you can come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and speak into the microphone.
My name is Michael Boyd, and I'm off of Albemarle. I just happen to have a note of that myself tonight before I even realized it was on the discussion. To me, looking at the map, the end of Albemarle, before it hits Broad Branch, on the left side, there's like a natural spot in there that you could easily make like a little sort of like a footbridge to the other side of the stream. And that way, if you got on the other side of that stream and had some connecting trails, you could go further to the right and get into the main part of Rock Creek Park. Because I agree with you now, that little section is like dangerous to bring a bicycle, or forget about walking. I see some people that are not too smart walking along that street. Two-way traffic, and it's just very, very narrow. But I think a good solution would be to get just on the other side of that stream, and you wouldn't really have to do anything to the existing road. It could be a sort of I'm thinking of something like a log type of bridge, very simple, or a little suspension bridge. But there's a little spot where you could really hook it in to. I don't know what it was there before. If you recall that little area, this looks like a little parking area that has a lot of big boulders in there that they must have put in there so people don't hang out there. But I think it would be a good little departure point just to get on the other side. And then you have to work with the national park to see how they could create some kind of a nice trail. That's all I had to say. But I'm glad you're considering that.
Nice. Manoli?
I just want to say, I do think the time is now to take this up. I'd raised it at the last meeting and withdrew in deference to hopefully seeing the environmental assessment. I think we can't hold out waiting and may get caught out between meetings when it actually does come through. So I applaud Commissioner Ray for taking it up in this meeting, and I think I would support the resolution.
Okay, is there any other member of the public?
Yes.
Any way to speak? Nice.
I am Doran McGrath. I live just above Broad Branch Road. on Brandywine. And I believe that the time has come to speak out on this matter. And I don't adhere at all to the ANC 3 passing, or 3F passing, a resolution that is meaningless. And I think this would be meaningless. Simply, it might indicate, one, I'm not in favor of the footbridge at all, because it leads mainly to the locus at which Chandra Levy's remains were found. And it's an extremely steep slope up to which to go at the park side or park end of the footbridge. So I don't think that would work at all. And once upon a time, there were no boulders placed in that place except to keep the people from washing their cars in Broad Branch, which it runs along beside the road. And I think the time has come to advocate, one, to wait for the environmental impact statement, since there were at least 2 people on my driveway measuring the noise caused by the cars that might pass along the Broad Branch. But more important is the fact that it needs widening, no question about it. I don't think that the Embassy of Malaysia or the Embassy of Italy, which occupy all of the land below Broad Branch, below Brandywine, all the way to the stream where it joins Rock Creek, farther south, are likely to give that up. I think, however, the motion might well be adopted as either 3 or 4, which would require that, and then let the Department of Public Works do its homework and determine whether or not we need an international treaty for Malaysia or Italy to give up the land required. Absolutely, the land has to be acquired in order to widen that. But I really, I respect Mrs. Ray's opinion, but I think it would be a meaningless resolution.
Thank you.
Yep.
Karen, you had a...
No, let Mary Beth answer
Yeah.
that first.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath, for your comments. I guess 2 thoughts. One is I really thought this time last month that it would have been meaningless, and I agreed with you. I would have agreed with you. And in fact, Commissioner Priniatakis and I talked about it, and I thought that it was premature. But since that time, I've spoken with several other ANCs, and they are waiting for us to act. And I think with regard to the embassy issue, I met with Pat Elwood a few days ago, and she's the mayor's chief of protocol and liaison to the embassies. And I gave her a heads up with regard to Malaysia and Italy, and she is going to speak with them about it. And again, she felt that it would be helpful to have a resolution in hand from our ANC so that she could speak with them about this and express the community's input. So I appreciate your comments, but I respectfully disagree.
Karen,
No,
well,
let David go.
Mr. Chairman, I'm David Bardeen. I live at 4701 Connecticut Avenue. I am one of the people who years ago walked with my grandchildren down that dangerous street, and my wife was pretty angry with me when she discovered what had happened. I support Commissioner Ray's resolution. I think it is a temperate resolution. It is a cautious resolution. It is a first step resolution. And by itself, certainly it doesn't resolve these issues, but that's what she's told you. It doesn't resolve. It just begins to make that commitment. As far as the footbridge, when you see the EIS and think about it, you can do that, but I can tell you that years ago I took one of my grandchildren clambering over those rocks, those boulders. I didn't realize we're not original, but I'm skeptical whether it can be done, but we can, when we see the 4 alternatives analyzed, You can look as an ANC, and the community can look and see whether we have any better ideas. The point is, moving off the dime is important, and this is your ANC, and Commissioner Ray's single-member district, and so if I were you, I would vote for that, and then see what happens next.
Thank you. Karen?
Me? I have one comment and a concern also, and I can support the resolution. It might be meaningless, but I think the third whereas gives me some concern, because where you say, whereas these residents do not have a safe way to access Rock Creek Park on bicycle or on foot, and you're referring to all of the residents in the paragraph above that, well, a lot of those residents do have a way of accessing Rock Creek Park. I mean, there's
Okay, why don't we say residents
I would just take out that
of
warehouse.
3F03, you could say, or residents of Forest Hills.
Well, no, you can't say that, because I live in Forest Hills, and there's a place right next to Bob where you can access Rock Creek Park.
Okay,
The trail.
3F03.
I would say, yeah, 3F03.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, I would say 3F03.
Definitely.
that's fine. I accept your friendly.
Yeah, I mean,
Or
'cause
you could even say Brandywine.
well, I'm just saying,
And
because
05.
people in Woodley Park and
And
other
05.
areas do have a
Okay.
way of accessing the park.
Okay,
My other concern, I think, is the embassy issue, because whatever we do here, we don't want other countries to impose on land we occupy either overseas. And that's always been a sticking point where it comes to the foreign missions, BZA and whatever. We can't use eminent domain to confiscate land from Italy or Malaysia. We also don't want for other countries intruding on our embassies in their countries. And that is a big concern to me. This is an innocuous resolution, so I mean, I can live with it. But I think we have to take into account also, we can't just take away land from Italy, which is Firenze, or Malaysia. And I don't think the federal government will allow it, truthfully, because, as I said, we don't want them intruding on property that we own overseas, either to build roads or do whatever.
Well, I think that's an issue for another day. And
Yeah.
I agree with you, it's an issue.
So what's the change with that?
So I accept friendly amendments, so that on the third whereas, it would read, residents of 3F03 and 3F05 do not have a safe way to access Rock Creek Park on bicycle
Who's
or on
five?
foot.
Where's five?
Manoli.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess I could walk to your house.
I mean, no, I'm not saying you have to walk to my house. I'm just saying, though, I wasn't sure who was five. I don't keep track of numbers.
There's a map.
If the
Okay.
map's the wrong way.
Do any other people in the audience wish to speak on this topic? Any other commissioners have any other comments? Okay, we'll vote on this resolution with the modifications. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, 7-0-0.
So you know what? Make me an abstain on this one. I'm going to abstain on it. Because I do have concerns about the foreign missions.
Okay. Can you
Now,
change?
leave me in, never mind. I'll
What do you,
take-
what do you want?
Just leave it in.
Leave it in.
Leave it in.
Okay,
Go on.
7-0-0, unanimous. All right, next topic is update on Van Ness Square. Sally can
I
give
get a letter.
a 1-minute thing.
She already did an
Basically-
update.
No, I didn't. I'll do
Basically,
the
she
update.
can give 1 minute on
I've got a letter.
I'll do the
why
best.
we need to present her resolution and why we need it, because next meeting we will discuss it at length, probably.
Maybe.
Probably. Okay,
So-
so just let me give an update. The update is the Park Van Ness Public Space revised design by Michael Ferguson will be presented next meeting, July 16th. The interior demolition is in process. The exterior raise permit application is still in process, but the possible start date is early fall. Brian Downey expects a contractor selection by midsummer, maybe in the next 2 weeks. And I have asked him for a pre-construction meeting as soon as the contractor has worked out his schedule, which again will probably be early fall. Since Saul Center has requested a public space committee hearing to be rescheduled
They
from.
haven't yet.
Yes, they have.
Not
It's
that-
in the letter.
It says they're going to.
Well, my understanding is they have from Brian.
We don't have that, though.
But the intent is that they cannot present because they do not have anything
Go
to
ahead,
show.
Sally, finish.
In submitting a letter to the Public Space Office for extended time to review the revised public space application documents. A similar letter has been sent to me to express this.
Do you have extra copies of that?
I have 7 copies.
Do you want to pass them out?
So are you done?
I'm done.
Can I request
Less than a minute.
change the agenda? I have a resident who's on the last item.
This is going to take 1 second.
I think we're not doing anything, we're done.
No, we're not.
No, we're not.
No, I think you said you're done.
No, I'm
No.
done, but we're not done with the letter.
But, yeah, we can move.
It's going to be real,
The
this
next
is,
item.
Manoli, this
This
is
is
going to
very
go
quick.
so fast, you're not going to believe
All right,
it.
anyway, so is there a second for the motion to send this letter?
No, there's no letter yet.
There's no
Wait,
letter yet.
she's gonna send
You
it.
haven't gotten the letter.
Right.
I just passed out a letter that I'd like to address to Juana Maya, basically saying that we're in receipt of the applications and drawings that they sent us, DDOT tracking number, whatever. That we also are attaching the letter from Brian Downey stating that they will be requesting a delay because they have not done it yet. That at a regularly scheduled meeting of us, we voted to request that the Public Space Committee be rescheduled from June 27th to a later date with sufficient time for the ANC to receive and comment on the revised drawings, because we don't have any new drawings yet.
Right.
And I don't want to get them the night of our meeting and then have to submit the
We will
next
probably
day.
get them the night of the meeting.
Well, we're not gonna, then we can't. They need to, it might go into August. And asking him to consider our request and let us know that they've taken it off the June 27th meeting.
Yes.
Okay. I will
I'd like to move the letter.
I will second that. Is there any discussion on this point from commissioners? Seeing none, any from the public? Seeing none, all in favor of sending this letter, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
So that's
Abstained.
700.
700.
So
Letter
what I'll
passes.
do is,
All right, so Manoli.
I don't know, do you want to sign
got
this
it?
tonight, or do
Yeah,
you
I'll
want me
do
to
it.
send it to
I'll
you
do it.
and type that in? Well, it's all done, and here it is.
Okay, so Manoli, you had a
Did you print
concern?
the resolution and the letter?
I did. Karen should have,
What?
grant guidelines. Was there something
Okay.
else?
What are we talking about?
Yes, the resolution and the letter.
The
The
911.
911 resolution letter, sorry.
I did not.
Oh, okay.
We
I
can
have
read-
it here.
we
I
can
can
read
read. I can read it.
So what do you want to do? Discuss this emergency response system thing ahead of where it is
Mhm.
scheduled? Okay,
Yes,
that's fine.
yeah, if possible, because
Okay, go.
our, aside from the
Northwest
the
Current.
current, our lone resident. So what this is in regards to is the issue that I raised at the last meeting with
You want me to send it?
Lieutenant Roman about the emergency response system. And what I'm proposing is a resolution to then support the sending of a letter, and I guess the resolution may not be absolutely necessary, but just to enforce the letter. This is related to an incident that occurred in May when there was a concern about a reported fire. Residents in my SMD in 305, Jennifer DiGiacinto, who was kind enough to have stayed throughout this entire meeting to speak about this, attempted to call 911 and was unable to get through, rolled over repeatedly to a recording, finally got through by calling 311, which is an explicit, explicitly contrary to the direction that that emergency services is now providing, but that actually worked and got her through to a dispatcher, who then was able to put her through to the fire department. There were some additional questions about getting the LD information correct through to the fire department. But then when the fire department did finally receive the information, they responded. Luckily, there was no fire, as it turned out. What was concerning was the process it took by which to actually get through to a dispatcher. I have the stats in my letter that the Office of Unified Communications has a target of having calls 98% of maybe the stats there, 97.5%, something along those lines, answered in 8 seconds or fewer. This took almost 10 minutes to get through to somebody who could respond to the fire. The fire department actually has a service level target of responding to calls within 8 minutes. This took 10 minutes to actually get through. Is that an incorrect stat? I was hoping to have the letter in front of me. What we're doing with this letter is following up on exchange of emails we had with Director of the Office of Unified Command, Jennifer Green, who frankly responded, and I quote her response in the letter, that there was effectively 2 emergencies at once, which resulted in the calls rolling over to a recording. That seems striking that in the District of Columbia that 2 calls, one related to a traffic incident and one related to a purported fire in Ward 3 was enough to overload the Office of Unified Communications on a Sunday evening. So it was not a particularly satisfying answer. Further responses or further queries were made by Councilmember Che's office and by the residents, and we've yet to receive really satisfactory responses. So we're now moving to this forum, to the ANC, and she was good enough to be here tonight to answer any questions or to discuss the issue as well.
Which one do you want, the letter or
You can
resolution?
leave the letter up. I don't think we need to read the letter necessarily. Hopefully people had a chance to read it prior to tonight. It's really calling for a number of questions to be answered. I may look at a future resolution or future avenues to raise this with the council or directly with the Office of Unified Command Communications in the future, but in looking for some more answers from Ms. Green in the meantime. So with that, if you'd like to speak, I'd offer it up, but I will.
Yeah.
I hate it also.
Couple things I just want to do a little bit more detail.
You need to use the microphone.
Do you want to use this one?
You can take it out of
I think the bigger issue is that the week before this happened to me, I watched on NBC4 how an elderly woman had a Broad Branch Road, had her house broken into, and she sat on the emergency response for 10 minutes while she chased this man down the sidewalk after he beat her, because she got the same recording I got. And when I watched this news report, I was stunned, thinking, oh my God, this is Washington, D.C. That must have been just an odd case. I found myself in that case a week later when I saw white smoke go past my window on a windy day, go outside and I smell burning rubber. And I see billowing smoke coming out of my row homes. I think it was a third end unit in between the end and the middle coming out of the roof. So when I'm trying to get 2 small children out of that house and getting rolled over to a voicemail saying, you've reached the DC emergency, hang on, I called 5 times, and they still didn't pick up. So that's a problem. It's a Sunday afternoon. 2 emergencies, a 4-wheel tractor and my billowing smoke. So I think some more answers need to be given to us. What happened? She basically just said this is the way it is. This is acceptable.
Thank you. So I make a motion to, I move to, I don't know what I'm doing. Resolution.
Figure it out.
You're going to move to send this letter.
Move to send the letter.
Okay.
And I offer the resolution in support of sending the letter.
I will second.
I'm sorry, who are you sending the letter to?
To Office of Unified Communications, to
Will
Jennifer Green.
will you CC the DC Council or at least the Judiciary Committee?
I have the CCs. I have a whole set of Tommy Wells, because it's Judiciary and Public Safety, Councilmember Che, the Chairman, the Mayor, Chief Ellerby, Chief Lanier were the people I put on the CCs. I can put you on it too.
I think you ought to put everyone on the Judiciary and Public Service Committee.
Okay. Happy to do that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, maybe add Michael Fabricant, since he's our link. And, you know, the chief was just here, the fire chief, but is he out?
No,
No,
it's
he's there.
Ellery.
He's
So it's
Isn't there some,
Ellerby also failed to, actually was quite disappointed, and he failed to respond to, at least not in a way that was apparent to us, to queries about this, understanding that this office that's the 911 dispatch is not actually responsible to him. We were surprised, though, to not see any response from him.
Okay. Well, here I will.
And can I just clarify, you keep saying that there was an emergency. This gentleman that had the billowing smoke, they had paper and leaves on his roof, his flat roof. He lit a fire unbeknownst to me in his fireplace. It's a rental unit. And that was the big cloud of smoke that ran by my window on a windy Sunday afternoon. And on top of that, he has a black rubber roof. So there was smoldering up there, okay? So I don't want that to, in 10 minutes, 3 row homes could be gone. So, you know, I could have, as a runner, made it up to Ellicott, knocked on the door, and had a better response than what I got on my cell phone and my home phone. So, don't think it didn't cross my mind.
I'm sure, say it again, the gentleman lit a fire in his
It was a
townhome,
Sunday afternoon in May.
And it wasn't.
No, and he's
the
from
damper
Spain.
wasn't
No, he's
open,
from
or-
Spain, and we had that talk after. Trust me, we had that talk. That, you know, we inspect fireplaces here, Rafa. You know, but it was, you know, all I can tell you is that the minute I stepped out of my home after that smoke, it was burning rubber. And I was just like looking, and that's when I saw the billowing smoke, and I lost my breath. I ran into the house, dialed 911, reporting. And I can tell you how helpless I felt. 2 times, and then 3 times on my mobile phone. And then I was thinking, oh my God, what do I have to teach my 8-year-old? Do I have to teach him to call 311 in an emergency now? Because I've been telling him 911.
I call the firehouse direct.
I'm going to get the number. Because seriously, it crossed my mind, but I had 2 little kids in that man's house that I was trying to get them out. And then a woman who had previously suffered a stroke in the middle one. I wasn't sure where it was coming from. So, but the fire department, once they got the information, responded tremendously.
Just so you know, 2 numbers I keep on my refrigerator, the fire department, both Cleveland Park and the one at and I keep the regular police department number.
That's a good idea.
So,
We can find those out and circulate them.
yeah, I
send
mean,
them to you
I
and
always
everyone
keep
else.
them. But I have a different
So I
comment.
don't actually know what they are. Karen, you have a quick comment?
I do. I support what you said, but I have a problem with the letter, the way it's written, and I have to be honest. To me, it's too long on this one incident before we get to the meat. I would like to see the opening of the letter be the 2 incidences where 911 didn't pick up. The one that you referred to where the lady was
An
rugged, yeah.
elderly woman,
And the second one being this.
a week later.
Yeah, and saying that our concern is the fact that 911 is not properly staffed, or whatever, that we have, we have concern because there've been 2 incidences within our ANC where calls weren't picked up. To me, that should be the opening. And I think it's too much on the background on this other incident before you get to the questions. It's just, I find that the district government, and especially Unified Communications, doesn't read. And they already know the incident well enough because they've reported on it to Mary, to whoever. So I'd like to see the letter shortened with the emphasis on 2 incidences in our ANC where they failed to answer their phones. And is it a staff, the reason being, that's just my personal.
Maybe the letter could be short and you could have an attachment.
Yeah, with
Another
those
thing
details.
I think we should do too is that Jennifer Green's response to me was that I did everything wrong. I did everything wrong because I didn't hang on. I didn't have time to hang on. And so, if that's the new drill,
they need to
Well, they
publicize
need to
it.
say that. They need to say, please stay on the line.
I've never had that happen at an EMS line.
I guess I'd like to see the letter shortened,
I understand.
and emphasis on 2 incidences in our ANC that weren't properly handled. I mean, that's just my personal.
Oh,
I think the
I
most
have no.
important is you gotta get the facts up front, catch their attention, and then hit them with the questions.
Yeah.
I'm fine with
And
taking
shorten
edits.
it.
Okay, yeah, I can get it.
And as Sally's, I think they've been beat, I think they know the incident that we're talking
Well,
about.
they
so
do. We've had numerous.
Yeah,
emails.
'cause,
Mary
Mary.
Jane has
You
weighed
could
in.
do attachments so that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll work on it.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll work on it. I do think having the text of the letter, of the response is illustrative of the concerns that the response basically was that the system worked.
Everything went right.
Well, I'm not saying that.
And that's that's a dissatisfactory.
Yeah, no, I think it's the 2 incidences within our ANC. It's not just the one. I mean, that's
We'll work on
though that's my concern, and I would like to see it
Are
shortened.
you okay with?
Yeah, I'll work on it.
Okay.
I had that in my initial letter to her. That's all that broad branch.
Yeah, I
stuff.
just didn't have the
No,
details of
yeah,
it.
no, so no, it's there, it's written.
Okay.
Do we know that was in our ANC? I mean, it was
Is it
our part of Broad Branch?
Yes,
Yeah, it was.
It was very close to our house on Broad Branch. He broke, do you remember that?
I do, I saw it on the news.
So
Yeah.
what is it?
When did it happen?
It was about a week or 2 about a week, it was on the news a week before this happened to me, but I don't know how long ago it took for them to get it on the
Right.
news. But she was
It was a
hit.
matter, it was the same day that it almost
She
happened.
was hit, and she ribbed the guy with her elbow in his rib, and that got him off of her, but she was chasing him down the sidewalk when they finally answered the phone 10 minutes later.
She was on her cell phone.
We'll figure
Okay.
that out and
Yeah,
revise
no,
it. So I guess.
if it helps, I will be glad to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you for
so-
staying so long.
Yeah, nice.
Putting
So
up with us.
given Karen's
Thank you.
changes are,
Thank you.
we'll just make the motion to approve this letter with some modifications to reflect Karen's edits. So,
Can we recirculate the letter before
Of
we
course.
send
yeah,
it?
we'll
Absolutely.
circulate it internally.
Absolutely.
So,
And the resolution.
given that, let's all vote on sending
I
this
didn't know
letter.
what
There's a resolution.
The resolution just says,
We don't
we're
need
gonna
it.
send the letter.
We don't need it.
Oh, we don't
Okay,
need that.
we
You
don't
don't
need
need
this.
the resolution? Good, because I was gonna.
Okay, so all in favor of sending this letter with Karen's modification tweets after we read it again?
700.
700. All right. With 4 more items, it's 10:06, and we're hitting what I said would be our permanent endpoint forever for all meetings. So let's do these quickly.
Is
So
it possible to postpone the grant making? Because I have a lot of questions and changes on that to the next meeting.
That's fine. The one thing
we
did you have
wanna
on
read-
both the guidelines and the
I have everything.
the bylaws?
I have everything.
Because I would like to try to deal with the bylaws.
I
The
would
bylaws
I have
now.
something I'd like to change in that.
Can you circulate it?
Was that tonight? I don't have a thing with me.
do you know what change you want?
Yeah, I
Do it
would like to
now?
see, yeah, I can do something very quickly.
Sure, because we can count this as a first reading. That's good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, so you can ponder bylaws as we ponder the next issue real quick.
Okay.
Can I just
No, I don't
ask
have to.
a
I can do it
bylaw
real quick.
question?
Yeah.
Does it make sense, I had made a bunch of, I mean, it's mostly typographical and clarifying points about the bylaws back in January.
I saw that.
Would it make sense to just do all the bylaw issues at one time? Because
I think it
I'm
would.
happy to dig that out
I
and,
think it would.
blend it in with what Manoli's got.
I think it would.
Procedurally, it doesn't really matter if we are on a couple different schedules, but
Okay.
we
The
should,
only-
we should
It's-
correct the
it's a grant,
typos.
It's important to get done
I mean, 'cause
before the
some-
summer, I
In
guess.
some places, it's
Well, we have next month.
relevant.
So we would read it once tonight, read it once in July, and approve it, I guess, in July. So is timing important?
Or are we gonna meet in August?
Who knows? Who knows?
The one,
Good.
so if we're gonna have open discussion real quickly on, so the proposed, does the response that we received from the Office of the ANCs, I'm looking at Commissioner Summerskill, impact the proposed bylaws
Not the bylaws changed.
Okay. Okay. So,
Let me tell you what I'm thinking.
Sure.
Since we're talking about it real quick.
Okay.
What I'm thinking is, I would just like to see, instead of this every 2, 3 out of 3 years, whatever, I would like just to see a simple line that says, ANC, the commission has discretion to modify any of the guidelines for projects of note or whatever within the commission area, as long as they comply with the laws, something to that effect, without having to be so specific. Because this gives us, we can only do grants for specific projects, but no more than 2 out of every 3 years. I wanted to see just a simple line saying that we have the discretion to modify any of the guidelines as long as they comply with the laws and regulations for projects of note. That way we can do them every year. If we wanted to do a group, we could do it, whatever.
well, I guess arguably that goes without saying.
Not if you put this in, because
Well,
this says.
so I think the alternative would be to just strike that,
Right.
those sentences altogether.
Right.
Because then we would.
I agree.
I just would like to see this discretion given to us.
Yeah, I would just do what Manoli said and take out the,
take
And
out
not
that.
do this.
yeah.
That's fine. But the bylaw amendment still would be necessary to strike that sentence.
Well, whatever.
Effectively that sentence, and the rest of the paragraph actually remains the same.
I mean, I guess that's where I'm coming from. I would like just the
I'm with
discretion
that.
to be for us, and not say how
I'm
many.
concerned that I don't have the rest of the bylaws in front of me.
I don't either.
So it's, here, I have it here.
Can you say what the rest of the paragraph says?
So it would say, and of course I took the grants piece out because I was looking at that in particular.
Oh, I was just handed a copy.
I don't have it either. but I'd like to see
Grants.
it.
Well, there's a number of restrictions that are actually
Oh.
in the bylaws. So grants should never duplicate, but the restrictions are largely,
What's in the law?
are repeating what's in the law. So, okay, the one at issue is section 4, it's Article 10, section 4D. Grant should be awarded on a one-time basis for specific community projects. Funds should be used on projects benefiting a substantial part of the ANC community or segment of the residents with clearly identified needs. The request could, however, come from a broad-based organization so long as it serves the ANC 3F community. It's actually reasonable to leave those,
The other parts in.
the funds should be, it actually, I would amend it actually to say funds must be, as opposed to should be.
I agree with you there.
It's actually grammatically incorrect to use the word should.
I'm a little uncomfortable doing bylaws changes on the fly.
Well, so anyways,
Can we bring this together for the next
Okay.
meeting?
Okay.
I got the proposal for the advertising next.
And
I'll
you know,
send mine.
and combine it with the other
Changes.
things that we found?
And is it possible for you and I to sit down and go through the changes, because,
Sure.
and maybe we can, because one of the things that you wanted to take out on the bylaws is something that was put in by the auditor and agreed to by the Office of the Attorney General, because it's not Gottlieb who has authority. It's the Attorney General and
No,
the
he
auditor.
was giving us an interpretation. He actually was passing something from the Attorney General. I tried to be careful of that, but if I made a mistake, then I'm happy to.
And it's the one that was, I think, number 10 that you took out? It's not
So
on
I
here.
guess Karen, it makes sense for you two to meet up, grab a coffee and chat about this. And maybe next month we'll just do a big,
It's the one with
big
the-
bylaws.
You took out the one that said,
We'll have the grant
there's no way that
guidelines
this can be based-
changes, and I'll do the presentation with the
Right.
marketing.
I don't mind
Fine.
doing the grant rules on the fly, but I'm a little uncomfortable with the bylaws on the fly.
That's
it
fine.
says when an applicant is seeking grant funds for
I
more
did
than
make
one
a
ANC.
resolution.
You did.
I did
Wait a
authorize
second.
it.
It says when the applicant is seeking grant funds for more than one ANC, ANC 3F will not make a grant in excess of what is provided by the other ANCs unless the grant application can prove that. That was recommended by the auditor because Wilson High School, Kappa and everything came to us for money and also went to 3C and 3G. And That was recommended by the auditor and approved by Leonard Byram when he was the auditor. And we voted on putting that in so that we weren't put in the position again by the Wilson crew and others, and it was approved by the Attorney General.
I guess we'll look into it and we'll figure
I've
out
got the
something. And
email.
you
No,
and
it just
Manoli can
seems sort
chat.
of circular.
I know.
No, I think the reason is some people come to us in the other ANCs.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
So Karen,
And we
you
should
two
give
can meet
10,000
Karen.
and
You
they
guys
get
can
10.
meet Karen.
Yeah,
Meet
I said.
next month,
That's what
and
I said.
you come back with clean, so we don't have to discuss it. We just
Yeah.
present. Okay. Great. All right. So next, the issue we were on that we will now talk about: discussion and resolution to support restricting parking on the east side of 37th Street Northwest between Tilden and Upton between 3 and 4 to alleviate traffic and bus parking issues at school ending time. So I am proposing that we send a letter to DDOT asking this. My change after talking with the neighbors Hurst and Sidwell is that it's the west side of 37th, not the east side of 37th. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because I've been down there about 20 times the past couple of weeks and no one really parks on either side. But that is what the people wanted when I talked to them. So basically, this is to alleviate the issues on 37th Street, and then when they're doing construction for New Hurst and things like that, this is kind of a preliminary step in the whole process of figuring out how to make that street work a little bit better. And Hurst and Sidwell support this fully and ask that we send a letter to DDOT, since DDOT asked me to get a resolution to them if we wanted this with their support. And then in other Hearst news, at 37th and Tilden, there will be a brand new crossing lines painted, and they're going to expand the sidewalk in front of Hearst to a full 20 feet. The PTA asked me to reach out to DDOT, and I talked to DDOT, and they agreed to do that rather quickly. They're going to do it. And they're also going to get a crossing guard at Hearst to protect the kids against construction. So, my resolution, once again, is to support restricting parking on the west side 37th between Tilden and Upton, between 3 and 4, to alleviate traffic and bus parking issues.
I'm sorry, you just said the west side?
West side, yes.
Not east side?
Not east side, correct.
So the Hearst side.
Can I ask a
No,
question?
the home side.
It's
It's,
the Sidwell side.
No, yes, Sidwell side.
which is the west side, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, but this says east, that's
It
what
does.
confused me.
That's
All right.
May I ask a question?
Yep.
There was, Sidwell has a campus plan that was approved by the, I don't remember, it was the zoning commission or the board of zoning,
Okay.
that had conditions for school pickup, drop-off, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Does this violate any of the provisions in that transportation plan?
I don't believe so. They're in compliance with their plan.
No, but I'm just saying, does this, changing this do anything to that plan?
Not that I'm aware of.
Because I didn't go back and read the plan, because this said east side.
I haven't read the plan, but I don't think this has anything
Because there
to
was
do
a
with that.
transportation management plan and school drop-off pickup plan that was approved.
I don't know. All I know is the pickup and drop-offs are working, except for an issue with cars parking and blocking the road drop-off time. So, is there a second for the resolution at all?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Is there any discussion at all besides what Karen raised? Seeing none, can we vote on this? All in favor,
So
say.
the west side now is the Sidwell side?
Yes.
Is it west? It's west, not
West,
east.
not east.
Sidwell side.
Sidwell side.
Yes,
Change. Yes. Okay. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, abstained, 7-0-0. All right, so miscellaneous. Bob, quick financial update.
The latest bank balance was $136,518.05. We have an available of $135,630.57.
Thank you, Bob. And then lastly, minutes. Karen had edits on the minutes.
No, I
Karen,
only have one thing, and
Okay.
somebody might need to refresh my memory like you, Adam, but number 11.
We have our secretary that can
It
refresh
says
our memory.
Commissioner Tope suggested that the ANC consider the possibility of advertising in the Northwest Current. I'm the one who suggested that. Because Manoli agreed with me and others did.
I don't have a problem switching.
And it says, as well as other possible venues such as the Chevy Chase or the Cleveland Park listserv. I thought what Commissioner Toth was suggesting was that the ANC advertise on those websites, is what they were was what was talked about.
Yeah, we're gonna propose making,
But-
I'm gonna make like a marketing plan to
Yeah, but it
promote
wasn't for grants.
to promote the grant
But,
process.
I think the motion was Commissioner Commissioner Perry suggested that the ANC would consider the possibility of advertising for grants in the Northwest Current. That's
Yes,
what we were
correct,
talking about.
correct.
It wasn't just advertising.
Okay, I don't think anyone has a problem adding that adjective in there.
Because I think that makes a
Okay,
big difference. We were talking about the grants at that point
Okay,
and where we should advertise.
that's fine.
And then I thought what you said was that the other ANCs had approached us about advertising on their websites.
No, the listservs mentioned to me that we should consider advertising on their listservs
Yeah.
as well, and I said that I would make a plan
but-
at our July meeting to
Yeah,
promote
see,
the
David,
grants.
that's what this isn't accurate.
Can we make
Yeah.
some small changes, David, on that? Okay, cool.
Am I right?
Yes, I think you are right. Is there anyone else that has edits on the minutes? Okay, seeing no one, can we vote to approve the minutes for last month? All in
I'd like to
favor?
see the rewrite.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it's correct.
I'm voting yes now.
I'm not voting against it, but I would like to see it.
We'll shift it around and make sure it's good. All right, all in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Or
Okay.
Karen, just send me the
All
exact wording you
opposed,
want. I'll
raise your
copy
hand.
and paste it.
Well, I mean,
All
Adam, I
abstaining?
think,
One, okay, 6-0-1.
wasn't here.
You can still vote on minutes if you're not here.
I can?
Yes.
You
A
would-
motion,
I would.
motion to
All right,
adjourn.
motion to adjourn,
Oh,
second.
wait, I have a quick question. Have we made any progress on the website improvement?
Yes, I spoke to 2 graphic designers who are making this proposal to have next meeting. It'll probably be around $3,000.
Great.
There was a recommendation on the Cleveland
There
Park
was.
listserv for somebody who was supposedly excellent. I don't know, is that one of the ones
That
you
is
talked
not
to?
because there was a question on the Chevy Chase listserv a month ago with the same question, and I just reached out to those people.
Oh, okay.
So there's lots of graphic designers around, but these people seem pretty good. They'll make a proposal. So motion to adjourn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Sally, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
One of the
Thank you.
things I would like to suggest now that we're off the record, the announcements